Trump gets his way, we also leave it.
Well, the
He's
thing about
dictating getting rid of the core stuff, I mean, pretty much.
I think what's happened is that it's going through this agency. And I think we also sent a letter to the village. So I mean, if you want to put it somewhere, there's like, Port of Skagit County.
Oh, that anywhere. Fires run there, power anything, charge it somewhere, anywhere.
But the Port of Skagit County, that's what it's for,
So
right?
they have one going.
Oh,
in
that's
there.
the
Oh, they do? Oh, that's, but people probably don't like that. The problem is,
I just read
and,
that.
They burn.
yeah, that's what I asked when I was.
So are the gamblers now power them at night? Because that's our red board for our.
Yeah.
I think it's the water, I think power, heat goes up and down. And
They can turn it off like up and down and change how much water.
they can, yeah.
So if they run the water, they can wait or reserve.
They said at a meeting you were at that they increased the size. So I don't know if that helps or not.
Unless somebody says, open up the gates and let it out, like they did in California for no reason.
Well, hydropower, is a clean power source and
It renews itself.
and it does other stuff, like over at
It keeps floods from happening.
it does in Eastern Washington, it helps farmers with irrigation. big time.
So,
And it's
no, yes, yes.
yeah, the Grand, I took a tour a couple of years ago, one summer with Grand Sewer, if you're ever over there, take that tour, that's just fantastic. It's, and that's like, say that provides like 10, that one dam, that's 500 feet high.
Give it 100, yeah.
Power, it's like.
You used to coming in at 6:30, so I didn't realize we were meeting.
See, that's like getting rid of those dams on the stretch.
I know, we
I
should.
mean, if you're worried about salmon, just
Right.
build salmon.
And quit fishing to death. You gotta quit fishing this small fish too, because if you don't, they have nothing to eat.
Assuming.
Well, it's what's happening with the water.
Nothing for me.
People say, oh,
One's online.
it's the tour boats and it's this, they're starving.
Yeah.
You go out, get all the smelt herring, bait fish for. They're wipe their food out. Salmon's food out, so there's nothing.
When I was the editor of Anna America about 20 years ago, and I used to get these fishermen, and they'd come in and they were always. They said those fish farms.
We'll do whatever you'd like to do. I'm willing to wait if you want me to wait. But if you want me to start.
They were Atlantic salmon.
You know the joke.
They're not,
They're not from
they're
here.
not, and they would skate.
Yeah.
And then breed with the native salmon, it just.
Slowly they were able to breathe. Alter that stuff.
Yeah, that was a bad situation. They killed those fishermen, like 10 of them were coming here.
System required some review. Oh, probably a pending update that hasn't. Oh, yeah. That happens.
Here.
I just told them, it always wants to do it during council meetings. We got it. Yeah.
Would you mind? And if you want to too, because.
I certainly, yeah, they do.
Counties and see taking right ways, trails.
But if you want to get started,
That's cool.
as soon as everyone sees it. No pressure.
Yeah.
It's a joint meeting, right?
Yes.
So.
Yes. Right, everything's fine, don't worry.
Right.
The bank robbery and they just want like the bank. There's a local, that's a pretty good room, like a meeting room.
Oh.
Go to different areas, like the museum, come back. And all that stuff.
Oh, he's so much.
Yeah, I'd like to,
You know,
like, you know, you have so many things.
Republican, senator, he wants to, he was joking, but there's some free to
The whole town.
democracy in America. And there's an air condition,
Because you could model it all.
because they used to, so how. And they go talk to their.
Really cool, so.
We did, party with everybody got,
Our systems did it all.
So cool.
So many of them. are
Yeah,
Yeah.
Here's a Facebook person. Yeah.
You know,
I'm on there, but I just use it for networking and not for the social aspect of it. That's what it was originally designed for, and then it turned into people's social agendas that have nothing to do with business.
Trading.
I get asked all the time, oh, what's your LinkedIn, you know, from business?
Well, and now that there's a lot of emails go back and forth, it will try to connect you and it'll like, a little thing will pop up and be like, do you know this person? Their LinkedIn account will pop up in front of them.
They get crazy. They get, you know, like, oh, the contract you signed is ready for final approval.
Yeah, no, that's clickbait. I get those a lot too. You're
But it's not
it's
hard.
like, your bid is ready for review. That road takes you out to level. And I'm like, I don't put.
Yeah, I just want to make some type of responding. That's all.
And you knew that so I was gonna meet with the same. Yeah. My road will take you around to do that.
I didn't have time when I said yes to figure out why. Okay, that's why. Okay, I see.
Yeah.
Decorating up a shop.
Dressing up.
So how do I get this
Store
sorted
counter.
Yeah. And I can't.
Go out to the corner.
So you're trying to get to city council, so I can
Yeah,
get
a couple of people dressed up like an elephant.
Oh, one, two, big elephant.
Oh, I'd be out there. I just want to see the documents.
Oh, okay, so that one we wouldn't,
I can't remember my password.
oh, so yeah, we'd have to go. with the second password.
Okay.
Yeah, all you have to do is.
So it might be best to, for now, so you can.
But I get it.
And then next meeting after we get this all set.
We got plenty of folks there.
Okay.
But just so that you.
Sure.
So I just want to put it out to the group.
Sounds good, thank
Would you like to get started or do you want to wait? We do know that there's at least one other planning commissioner that's coming in. Do you want to wait till that in? And he is the chair, Joe Fernand. Or do you want to get going? We'll leave it at the wish of the council.
I think we can get going with the first part, and that would probably put it around 9:30 by the time that we would expect them, unless they're gonna be 15-20 minutes late.
So the presentation, is she waiting online for us?
Yeah,
Okay.
we could start.
And we were really hoping the planning commissioners could see that, but,
Yeah, let's wait.
all right, so, all right.
What do you guys think?
I'm gonna go ahead and call this meeting to order and we will move forward. Will you please stand with me to say the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I will take roll for us. So Councilman Lloyd,
Here.
Councilwoman Kesty, Councilwoman Diamond, present, Councilman Henderson,
Here.
Councilman Kopp,
Here.
Councilman Burns,
Present.
and Councilman Lavaka.
Present.
And do you want to take roll or somebody take roll?
Sure. Commissioner DeWine is online. And Commissioner Freiberger is here. We expect Commissioner Burnett to be here shortly, and I think Commissioner Patizzi is trying to get online.
Okay, perfect. All right, so Tom, I'm going to turn this over to you because it looks like the next thing on the list is our special guests and speakers. So
Yes, thank you. Good evening. So tonight we'll hear from Catherine Mitchell, who's with the Department of Commerce. And she is the contact for the multifamily tax exemption program, or MFTE program. And we asked her to come here tonight to present to you what the program is. And of course, it's an opportunity for you to ask her questions too. She's our expert. She was at staff meeting yesterday via online, so we at least had that presentation once, but I think that it would be good for you all to hear about it. We've been hearing about it for a while. So Catherine, are you ready?
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, excellent. I'll go ahead and share my presentation here. I'm Catherine Mitchell. I've been with the Washington State Department of Commerce since 2021. Previously, I worked with the Housing Trust Fund, which is state subsidized affordable housing. Since June of last year, I've been the multifamily tax exemption program manager. And I heard from staff that there was some interest in Sedro-Woolley in exploring the MFTE program. So I'm looking forward to giving this presentation. It's about a 30-minute introduction to the program. But before I get on to the MFTE, I want to introduce Commerce. Many of you will be familiar with Commerce's work to administer the Growth Management Act, but our work truly touches the lives of every person living within the state, from crime victim advocacy to the equitable expansion of broadband. If you want to connect with or hear more about any of our divisions, please feel free to reach out. So, what is MFTE and why are we here to talk about it? The state needs 1.1 million new homes over the next 20 years, and the legislature's created a wide spectrum of programs to address all aspects of this housing need. Programs like Housing Trust Fund use public funds to address the need for permanent supportive housing at the deepest level of affordability. MFTE leverages private market funds, incentivizing development in the middle of this affordability spectrum, and is a widely utilized part of the toolbox to meet our goals. In the most basic terms, MFTE is a tax relief in exchange for housing production. The multifamily housing tax exemption was created in RCW 8414 that allows cities and counties to provide a property tax exemption in exchange for providing at least 4 new housing units through projects that build or rehabilitate housing. An MFTE program can provide exemptions between 8 and 20 years with different levels and timelines for affordability. In addition to the minimum requirements in the statute, cities and counties can further customize their MFTE program to meet their established housing goals and policies. This flexibility can be useful for providing greater levels of affordability or providing other public benefits. While this explanation is pretty straightforward, there's still a lot of complexities in both the state framework and local programs that are important to understand, which is why we're offering this opportunity to dig into MFTE. Across the state, 58 cities and 1 county have adopted an MFTE program. We've seen wide adoption in communities of all sizes and character because MFTE can be customized to meet each local government's needs. Fife and Battleground are the newest adoptees of the MFTE program, which you can see highlighted on the list here. 61,000 new units have been completed with the program since 2007, 11,000 of them affordable. MFTE programs have been created across the state in jurisdictions of all sizes to support housing. In 2023, 67 MFTE projects received certificates across 17 cities in 8 counties. That's 727 affordable units and almost 6,000 total. You can find the full details of each year's annual reports at Commerce's MFTE homepage at commerce.wa.gov/MFTE. As you can see here, the solid bars represent multifamily development in the years 2020 through 2022. The red outlines here are the percentage of multifamily development in each of these cities that utilized MFTE. We don't know if the development would have occurred without MFTE, but we know it plays a critical role in helping developers make the decision to invest in a community. Please note that this graph excludes Seattle for scale. Seattle currently represents about 1/2 of the MFTE development in the state, but With adoption by more smaller jurisdictions, that ratio is changing. For this presentation, we'll be covering the following. First, we'll be giving an overall summary of the MFTE program framework at the state level. What's included in the program, what are the major requirements from the state, and how you can change the program as needed to meet your local needs. We will also discuss how to evaluate whether MFTE may be the right tool to help you reach your housing goals and what options within the MFTE framework would be most useful. We'll highlight many of the benefits and challenges associated with using MFTE, including those that may require some coordination during program development. And finally, we'll describe how MFTE programs operate in practice, including the general process used to grant an exemption and the required support necessary for these programs. First, let's take an overall look at the program. Statute defines the exemption created by the program as applying to, quote, the value of new housing construction, conversion, and rehabilitation improvements exempt from ad valorem property taxation. So the basis of the MFTE program is that cities and counties are authorized to exempt property taxes on the residential improvement value of new projects. That's not just local taxes, but all property taxes. This includes the shares of property taxes that go to the state and other taxing districts as well. However, only new residential improvements are included in this exemption. Non-residential improvements, such as ground floor retail and mixed-use projects, are not exempted. The value of the land is also not exempted. This means that while property taxes are significantly reduced, they're not completely waived for these projects. Also note that this involves new improvement value, not existing value on a property. For rehabilitation projects, this means that only part of the residential value will be exempt from taxation. Here's an example of what the taxed and not taxed percentages for exempt properties look like in 2022 across various jurisdictions. Often, MFTE does not result in a reduction of revenue for the jurisdiction. A tax shift usually occurs where property is assessed at new construction values and then removed from the rolls, and the value of exemptions are paid by other property owners. We'll discuss tax shift in greater detail later on. Taxable construction activities related to projects supported by MFTE also remit sales taxes to state, city, and county governments. Upon sale, rental and owner-occupied MFTE units will pay excise taxes to state and local governments. This will cover not only initial sales upon the completion of construction, if applicable, but also future sales. While not tax revenue per se, MFTE projects will also be responsible for impact fees, connection charges, and other development fees charged by a community. For projects that include affordable housing, local governments may have programs that provide partial or even full waivers of these charges as an additional incentive. While the residential improvements on a site will be exempt, commercial components of buildings and underlying increases in land value will still be taxable. For mixed-use buildings or revitalization projects, this would represent an increase beyond a vacant site or a site with heavily depreciated improvements. In addition to impacts related to the building itself, there's also local effects from sales taxes paid by the residents of new construction and additional B&O taxes from new local businesses. Note that while both can be related to an increase in local business activity, higher sales taxes also are received from online purchases charged at local points of sale. Certain sources of state funding support for local jurisdictions might depend on local population, or in case of school funding, local student enrollment. In these cases, an MFTE program that supports an increase in local population might adjust the results of these calculations. This exemption is not permanent and will expire after a certain length of time. The different periods, 8, 12, and 20 years, all have different minimum affordability requirements under the statute, and some have additional requirements about the types of jurisdictions and projects that are eligible. There are 12-year extensions allowed for the 8 and 12-year programs, which are typically applied with similar requirements to the local 12-year programs. Note that this applies to both rental housing and owner-occupied housing. As such, this can be a way of promoting affordable home ownership within the community too. While this presentation will focus on the requirements as presented in the statute, jurisdictions can add more restrictive requirements to these programs than what's required by the state. Under state requirements, communities must identify these areas where MFTE can be applied and designate them as residential targeted areas, or RTAs, through a resolution. These areas are required to have certain characteristics. First, they must be within an urban center as determined by the council, which means that urban residents may obtain a variety of amenities, including recreation space and access to retail and services. They must also lack sufficient available, desirable, and convenient residential housing, including affordable housing. Essentially, this means there needs to be a gap between local supply and demand that's keeping people out of the neighborhood that might want to move into the area. New housing built in the area will also help to meet local goals, both in terms of just meeting the overall amount of housing needed and potentially meeting the needs for specific types of housing, including affordable housing options. Finally, there are some additional requirements on counties, which I won't go into today as I'm speaking with a city. Note that different communities designate RTAs in different ways under this framework, and you have the flexibility to choose which approach works best for your community. Some, like Seattle and Spokane, designate all multifamily residential areas. Some, like Tacoma, all neighborhood centers. Some, like Renton, designate transit station areas or TOD. Some, like Vancouver, target areas for redevelopment. And some, like Issaquah, pick individual sites. It's also important to note that communities may decide to apply different program parameters to different RTAs, such as different lengths of exemptions or different requirements for application. This means that communities can tailor their program to meet different needs in different neighborhoods. One area that needs significant investment where development may be less feasible could receive incentives with fewer requirements, for example. As noted before, there's different minimum requirements based on the length of the exemption under this framework. These requirements are focused on housing affordability, although there might be some requirements for the type of project included. First, 8-year exemptions have no additional requirements from the state. That means that a 100% market rate project can be exempted from property taxes under the program. Typically, these types of programs are most applicable in cases where affordability is not the primary concern, such as cases where communities just need additional housing development or are looking to redevelop specific areas such as older commercial districts. The 12-year exemption requires that projects provide at least 20% of the units as affordable to households earning up to low and moderate income households. That means that households making up to 80 to 115% of the area median income in a particular location would be eligible for this income-restricted housing. For these income-restricted units, the occupants of affordable units must be granted 1 month's rent for relocation assistance at the end of the exemption, when the rent on their unit can be increased to market rents. The 12-year extension has similar requirements to the 12-year base exemption, but it only allows rentals to low-income households up to 80% AMI, even if operating as an extension to the 8-year MFTE. So if you have a 12-year exemption and apply for an extension, the requirements get stricter. The 20-year exemption can really be thought of as two separate programs based on whether it's used for rental or owner-occupied housing. For rentals, the program requires there's inclusionary zoning in place that mandates new projects enact a 99-year covenant to preserve permanent income-restricted units. This would preserve at least 20% of the units for households making 80% of AMI in perpetuity. With owner-occupied housing, a project can qualify for the exemption only if at least 25% of the units are under the control of a qualified nonprofit or government agency that will be charged with administering them and ensuring that they remain affordable in the long term. In addition to these requirements, there are a number of others about the location of these projects, such as proximity to high-frequency transit and local zone densities. These are on top of the requirements for residential targeted areas and may further restrict where in a community the 20-year exemption can be applied. What we've been covering is minimum state requirements, however. Under the statute, communities have the latitude to provide for their own requirements to help meet their own needs. The most common change that many communities make is to tighten the affordability requirements. This can involve increasing the number of affordable units required of a qualifying project, but most often it's focused on reducing the maximum household income for qualified households. However, other communities have used MFTE to mandate that projects must provide other public benefits to qualify. This can include such things as LEED Green Building certification, contributions to public amenities such as parks. These public benefits need to be commensurate with the development incentives provided from the program, however, and this will be layered on top of the affordability requirements that would already be included. Communities can provide contractual provisions for project operations with requirements for prevailing wages for workers, inclusion planning, and the use of apprenticeship programs as part of the development agreement that implements the MFTE program. Given these characteristics, would MFTE be a good fit for your community? And if it is, what are the characteristics of a local program that would be most important? To meet housing needs shown earlier, many communities have seen the need to accelerate housing productions even in difficult economic situations. Providing an incentive such as this can help to facilitate new projects, especially in communities where development would need additional support to be feasible. MFTE can target a specific area or neighborhood for reinvestment or redevelopment, and incentives are needed to catalyze new investment. Housing affordability can be addressed via MFTE, and the provisions for housing affordability can help to increase the availability of units for low and moderate income households. This isn't a full solution, especially since it can be challenging to address the needs of very and extremely low income households through this program alone. However, it's one part of your housing toolbox. Whatever the reason for consideration, jurisdictions should remember that developers will only participate in the MFTE program if it makes financial sense for them to do so. You can't set these requirements from a jurisdiction-only perspective. When the need for an MFTE program is being explored, it can be important to investigate several different factors. What are the overall housing needs in the community? What are your local housing goals and targets? How do the development trends compare with projected housing targets? Are there specific areas that need more investment, shortfalls in specific types of housing, or shortfalls in affordable housing production? What other housing policies and programs does the community offer? Have those programs achieved their goals, or are they progressing towards those goals? Are they aligned with identified needs? And can MFTE help promote that desired development? Would an MFTE program cover the housing types and areas in need? Would it make financial sense for developers to use the program now and in the future? Can it work with other housing programs and incentives? And can it serve as a catalyst for other development? Aside from the housing needs in a community, there's also other considerations to keep in mind. Many of these elements could be presentations into themselves. Because of that, we won't get into them in great detail, but there are resources available from the Department of Commerce's MFTE webpage that can provide more information about these considerations, and our staff here at Commerce is available for any questions you might have. With financial impacts, one critical consideration is that the money for the tax exemption comes from somewhere. Depending on different factors, this could be through reduced tax revenues or tax increases on other taxpayers called tax shift, either of which have implications that need to be discussed. The exact implementation of tax shift or foregone revenue in your community is the jurisdiction of your county assessor's office, so it's important to coordinate with them while you're devising your program. Additionally, there are some costs to the city for administration and ongoing reporting and oversight that need to be considered by communities as well. Community engagement is a critical component of the success of an MFTE program. Even aside from the public hearing required to designate an RTA, communities should be active in hearing both sides of the program. Developers will be able to tell you whether the program will work under current financial conditions, and other stakeholders, including the council, planning commission, and the general public, will be important to engage throughout the process to understand if the public benefits are worth the incentives provided. Housing displacement is an important consideration, especially since when used improperly, an MFTE program could increase development pressures and accelerate displacement. Understanding local conditions and options for incorporating requirements into an MFTE program can address displacement and be critical to mitigating these impacts on existing communities. Finally, MFTE programs need to be administered by local staff. First and foremost, this needs staff resources. However, understanding how to publicize and integrate the MFTE program into existing processes will be essential. And that transitions into this next section. How do you actually create and administer an MFTE program? We're looking at the life cycle of an MFTE program. Once a community decides it wants to establish an MFTE program, there's several steps they follow. First, you adopt or revise the program, requiring coordination to set up the major elements. Under the program, you'll need to shepherd applications from initial receipt to approval. Once approved, the exemption needs to be issued and managed by the county assessor. Finally, even after the exemption's issued, communities still have required steps with regular monitoring, outreach, and reporting. When adopting the program, there's several steps that communities need to take. A critical step, which can be easy to overlook, is that staff and resources should be allocated to the program. In many cases, communities provide for a fee to collect to partially or completely offset this staff time. But this needs to be explored upfront to ensure that the community can support the necessary overhead. The community should evaluate where the MFTE program would apply based on its goals and adopt these locations as residential targeted areas. This does require a public process to complete. After designating the RTAs, a community should define the parameters of the program. Most significantly, this would include the exemption lengths and types. This can be affected by what your jurisdiction is allowed to offer under statute, as well as how these options would fit with addressing local housing needs. The MFTE program needs to be developed as part of an ordinance, which should be drafted to consider these different factors. Commerce has supporting material that's useful at this step. We have a model code, sample forms and certificates, and other materials. Finally, communities need to develop public materials, both for developers and for general information. This can help both to publicize the program to encourage its use and to answer questions that may come up from residents about how the program works and what it's intended to do. Receiving applications for a tax exemption under an MFTE program is typically handled as part of the regular permitting process. Communities usually require MFTE applications before construction permit approval. Although this is not explicitly required in the statute, many of the requirements can overlap with other permitting requirements. When a complete application is received, it can be approved either by the council or a designee, such as the planning director or planning staff. However, given that the program should have clear requirements under the ordinance, there may only be a limited amount of leeway in accepting or denying an application. After approvals, the community provides the property owner with two things. First, there's a conditional certificate of approval that states that a property will be eligible for the exemption when it's completed. The community also provides a development agreement, a contract that includes the provisions for the MFTE, such as any requirements for affordable housing. Once that conditional certificate's received, the property owner goes away to complete the project. Typically, they have up to 3 years to complete the project before that conditional certificate expires. This can be extended by 24 months if the project's delayed, but only in situations where the property owner is acting on good faith and the delay is due to circumstances out of their control. Determining these conditions are at the discretion of the council or their authorized representative. After final approval, staff will forward the exemption to the county assessor. The assessor will make the associated changes in their records, and under the statute, the exemption will start the following January. This can be important to keep in mind. Exemptions issued in February or March won't get prorated for the remainder of the year, for example. Although issuing the exemption is a big step, it's not the final one. Across the entire lifetime of the exemption, local staff need to keep active with engagement, monitoring, and reporting. First, it's essential that property owners and managers understand the conditions of the tax exemption. Although developers may be familiar with this, properties can be sold to new owners that may not be clear on their obligations under the program. This type of outreach can help to ensure these properties stay in compliance over the long term. There are reporting requirements from MFTE properties that these owners and managers also need to be aware of. While these are required for all properties, the projects with affordable housing requirements need to provide evidence that their tenants qualify for the program, which can require paperwork. Communities are also required to submit annual reports to the Department of Commerce about their programs. This includes information that can be received from the application and individual reporting requirements, but it does take some staff time to compile this information and potentially chase after property owners that may not provide their own reports promptly. Affordable units in MFTE properties are audited by the state every 5 years. Alternatively, jurisdictions can also set up their own independent audit program, which we can provide resources and procedures for. Finally, while this is not a statutory requirement, it can be important for communities to collect and compile data from the program that can help to evaluate progress towards meeting local policy goals. This information can be useful for regular reporting to the council, as well as regular updates to the public for transparency. There are a few other miscellaneous considerations to keep in mind. Communities need to be aware that while exemptions will expire after a certain period, they can also be canceled. This can be at the behest of the community, where it's clear that a property owner is out of compliance with the program, such as by not providing the affordable units promised. In this case, they may need to pay back all or part of their exemption with a penalty. However, property owners can also voluntarily cancel the exemption with no penalty if they no longer want to be covered under the program. While the program provides for affordable units, there's no clear way from the statute to make sure that eligible households are matched with these units. Many developers can often work through online listing services to publish these units. Communities can play a role in coordinating with local housing organizations to link qualified households with these units. Communities should explore these options as a means of improving access. Finally, we can't stress enough that this is not simply a program that you can create and leave alone. It does require staff time and resources to operate properly, and making sure that there's clear public information about the program and available staff to contact with questions can be essential at increasing the uptake of the program with local projects and improving the process to apply for these exemptions. For some closing thoughts, we'll cover some final concepts and describe the resources available for communities interested in implementing and managing MFTE programs. In this presentation, we've covered several topics, including an overall summary of MFTE and its important components, factors to consider when creating and updating an MFTE program, and how to implement and administer an MFTE program. A few final things to keep in mind. The MFTE framework can be a big incentive in the private market for market rate and affordable housing. This means it can help to achieve a lot of housing goals more effectively than other incentives. However, remember that the market still plays a major role in the development of housing under an MFTE program. If market conditions change, that can affect the efficacy of an MFTE program in meeting local housing goals. But this means that when used in conjunction with other housing incentives and programs targeted to the private market, you can get better results. Any exploration of MFTE should also consider the other programs that are currently available or could be implemented. Also, just make sure to match the incentives with what developers can provide for those incentives when considering customized requirements. It can be important to ensure that it makes financial sense for property owners to participate instead of simply walking away or choosing to move forward without the tax exemption. Very deep levels of affordability, for instance, they're attractive from a policy perspective, but tax exemptions can be hard-pressed to compensate owners for that reduced rent revenue. And that brings forward the overall point that for MFTE to work, it has costs that need to be balanced with what's received from the program. This is true of developers that may choose to participate based on whether or not they'll come ahead financially, even if they need to provide affordable housing. However, it's applicable for the public as well. The private incentives provided through the tax exemption need to be balanced by the public benefits received through increased housing production, affordable housing opportunities, neighborhood revitalization, and other elements. Because the need for these public benefits will change over time, however, the purpose and the goals of the MFTE program will also change. Communities may have created an MFTE program initially to promote redevelopment of their downtown and increases in local housing development, but over time, development conditions may improve and there's a greater need to improve access to affordable housing. In situations like this, there may be a decision to change the parameters of the MFTE program to shift incentives to favor affordable housing. Overall, communities need to revisit their programs pretty regularly to ensure that both the public benefits and the private benefits are worth the costs, and very importantly, that the public is clear about what's being received in exchange for the costs of the program. There are more details to the MFTE framework that are important to consider that we've only touched on in this presentation, and there may be other questions that you may have. So where can you find more information? First, the Department of Commerce provides support for the MFTE program. There's a website run by Growth Management Services that provides more details on the program, and there's staff technical support available that can help answer any questions you may have. The Department of Commerce has also put out a detailed MFTE workbook that includes almost all information about the program overall, as well as the model code, sample forms, and certificates mentioned earlier. This can also be a source of answers for any questions you may have about MFTE. However, there's also informational resources available from the broader community. Other municipal administrators of MFTE programs are often quite willing to talk about their own experiences and challenges for one. It can also be important to engage with local developers who can be a resource on what may be possible to do with the incentives provided by an MFTE program. If you have any questions at all, I'm here in the meeting now, and you can also reach out by email. Your staff has my contact information. I'm available for any future meetings that staff might have with any questions as you consider this program further. Thanks so much for sitting through this presentation, for listening to the details on the MFTE program, and I appreciate your jurisdiction considering MFTE to meet their housing goals.
Thank you, Catherine. So are there any questions for Catherine?
I had a quick question.
Yes.
Catherine, I didn't see the list went up pretty fast of where this program is. Are there any other municipalities in Skagit County? I didn't see any.
Yes, there are. I believe we have jurisdictions in just about every county that use it, but we've got let's see. I believe we have Burlington. No, actually, I'm sorry, they're not. I actually am not sure there's another jurisdiction in Skagit County that uses it currently.
Okay, that's helpful. I had one other quick question. I guess one concern I would have is a developer takes advantage of this for a few years and then says, oh, the heck with it, I'm going to voluntarily quit and bring in, higher paying people. Does that happen?
It does happen, yes. But of course, if they end the exemption, they have to provide relocation assistance equaling 1 month's rent to any current affordable tenants. So they might not come out ahead in that sense. And they also forego any future years of the tax exemption. So it's a pretty weighty decision for them to make.
Thank you.
Yes, Councilman Lloyd?
Yes, ma'am. How, with these exemptions, the city will give exemptions. Well, how does the city make up the revenue that they're losing when they're given the exemption? Because it's already hard enough to get by with the money we have.
Absolutely. So that final discretion is up to your county assessor. So you'll have to coordinate with the Skagit County assessor. Most counties generally will not forego revenue, right? They won't say this revenue, we're just not collecting it. Generally, what counties will do is they'll add it to the rolls, they'll take it out, and then they'll shift the value that's exempted to all other taxpayers in the jurisdiction. So every other parcel's taxes go up marginally to cover the amount that's exempt.
Well, it's kind of like it is now where they take the total, when the county wants 100 million, they spread it out over everybody.
Exactly, yes.
What'll happen again?
It's yes. So it's other taxpayers in the same jurisdiction or other taxpayers in the county. And again, the exact implementation of that is up to your county assessor's office.
So the money doesn't disappear, it just comes from other sources.
If the county assessor implements a tax shift, which it's not clear if the Skagit County does, again, it would have to be at their discretion. You'd have to get feedback from them about how they implement these property tax exemptions.
Thanks.
Yes, Councilman?
Yeah.
Councilman Lubaka?
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. That was definitely interesting. I was wondering, so there's been 60,000 homes that have been built since 2007, and you guys, the state is looking to do 1 million. Is that correct?
That's right. And that's 1 million through all forms of housing construction, not just MFTE.
Okay. So this is the 60,000 is just to the FMTE.
Yes.
And then 11,000 of those are affordable, considered affordable, or that right there. How much of the 1 million are needed to be in that MFTA or affordable? Or is this just like part of that solution?
It's part of the broader toolbox. Commerce has published on their growth management services website a list of what amount of units are needed in each income category. And obviously for the lower income categories, right, when you're looking at 60% AMI or less, MFTA typically isn't going to tackle those needs, right? Generally, you're looking at the low to moderate income folks, folks making 80% to 115%, generally full-time workforce individuals are in these affordable units with MFTE.
And then, so the tax shift basically places the burden on the rest of the citizens, but if we increase units, aren't we increasing like childcare, schools, things like that? And so when we see a large growth of like children in a community because of the new housing, what tends to happen is a school needs to be built or we're petitioning for that. So we'll see a levy, but that levy will go to the existing homeowners, right?
Yes, so all new residential construction is exempt for the length of the exemption, right? And if a tax shift is implemented, then those costs will be shifted to other taxpayers in the community. Of course, population in an exempt unit still counts for receiving state funding for schools. And that exemption expires, right? So the exemption is 8, 12, 20 years, right? Typically 12 for a community of the size of Sedro-Woolley. And the building will last for more than 12 years. So at the end of those 12 years, the tax shift will end. That property will be paying the full value of its property tax for the remainder of its life.
Thank you. And I guess my last question would be for maybe the mayor or Charlie. Is this something that I'm confused on, like Sedro-Woolley even needing or exploring that? It seems like we got so much development going on, or we're running out of land is really what the deal is. What would be the focus on bringing the MT or the MFTE to the council?
It actually is a beautiful fit to our comprehensive plan. What's been laid before us from the GMA. So that's why we are looking at this. More than that, we do know that we have at least one contractor who's interested in taking advantage of this. And so in order for that to happen, it has to come to the council first to approve. So I don't know, Charlie, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, it's just a little bit more detail. I think in particular, the affordability goals that are going to be coming out of the new comp plan, this could be a tool that we might use to help us satisfy some of those.
Yeah, oh, I think we're talking about that a little bit later on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess if I was a developer or contractor, I would definitely eat this up, but it just puts it puts the burden on the rest of our citizens. And I think that, you know, as just for myself, I would be cautious with that. I don't know that their biggest deal is maybe getting support from the council or looking at the roads, the parking, all the stuff we're discussing. Not necessarily like, hey, we need to save a couple of bucks here by having an exemption. They're not trying to put a burden on the rest of the citizens. In fact, I would almost think the citizens would see that as a negative toward the developers. I don't think they want that. Maybe some do, but I would think a lot probably wouldn't want that reputation. They'd probably be like, no, we'd like more support from the council on regulation, building, where we can zone, where we can rezone, things like that.
All right,
Thank you.
Commissioner Patisi.
Thank you. Is my voice heard?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. So I've sat back through a lot of these presentations. And again, I apologize so much for being late because I'm the kind of guy that's totally on time. And if it wasn't for a quick little phone call, I'm back here. So anyway, I hear what everybody's saying, but we're kind of maxed out right now. So I have no idea as to where we're at right now with our development goals, with our different zoning, that we've upzoned so many different places that we just don't have the transportation infrastructure right now, or sanitation, or a whole bunch of other things of how we're going to bring these different concepts into place. Because the Skagit Valley is a very unique kind of place.
Commissioner, do you have a question for Catherine? While we have her on the line, do you have a question for Catherine while she's here?
No, I'm just making a statement, Mayor.
Okay.
I apologize.
Okay, yeah, so
I have
I'm
no
looking for questions for Catherine. Go ahead, Councilman Henderson.
Thank you. Hi, Catherine. Can you give an example of how much staff time and resources would need to go into implementing this program, like a city of our scale?
Absolutely. And Sedro-Woolley has about 13,000 people. You know, we've seen jurisdictions with even smaller amounts of people implement this. And, you know, for a city like Seattle, right, they have multiple full-time MFTE staff. For a smaller city, you're likely to only be processing 1 or 2 applications a year. The monitoring, you know, the compiling of the report, that will take 1 or 2 days, right? You know, this is something that can be on the plate of planning staff that is responsible for a wide variety of other responsibilities. You don't need 1 full-time employee just for the MFTE program with a jurisdiction of this size.
Okay, and I have a follow-up question. So recently, House Bill 1337 passed, I think it was last year. So that allows for 2 ADUs per single family residence lot. I'm sure you know everything there is to know about that House bill. Do the MFTEs, does that include the provisions within House Bill 1337?
So for a property to qualify for MFTE under current state statute, it has to provide at least 4 new multifamily units. So it would have to be in an area zoned for the construction of 4 or more units to qualify. So adding 2 ADUs to a single family home would not be eligible for MFTE.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question for Catherine?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Councilman Burns.
So if a city implements this, are they able to select quadrants of the city and say that we're willing to accept this many units in this quadrant, this many units in that quadrant, so that they spread it out over the city?
Yes, you are able to set different requirements for different RTAs and set a maximum number of development in those RTAs.
So if we only set 1 or 2 areas because we have such a limited amount of space to grow right now for this type of development, we wouldn't be under any legal constraint to expand it to other areas, would we?
Nope, you're able to revise the RTAs at any time. You just have to follow the procedures set out in state statute, which we also have available in our handbook. And that requires a notice of public hearing, 1 public hearing, and then adopting it as an amendment to your ordinance.
Okay, so this could be quite focused in use, so we don't have to generalize it or have it wide open.
Absolutely. And you can see, for example, Issaquah does this on the parcel by parcel level. They designate individual sites for development.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, go ahead,
I just have
Councilman
one
Henderson.
more. Can you touch a little bit more on, you said there was something in your presentation. It was very quick. I was trying to keep up. But it was about having building plans that have already been approved can be resubmitted for MFTE. Was I hearing that right?
There's no requirement at the state level that you have to apply for an FTE before the regular permitting process, but I will say most jurisdictions do require it prior to. That would be up to the wording of your ordinance, whether somebody who's already received planning permission would be able to apply.
So at what point in the state statute would we be able to say, okay, you built this fourplex 5 years ago, you're not eligible for it?
Yeah,
Or you just recently got your occupancy?
it has to be 4 new units that don't exist at the time of the application.
Yes, go ahead,
At
Councilman
least
Cox.
4.
Yeah, I had another question. I'm sort of following up on what Councilman Burns said. So, and partially this is a statement that the multifamily housing that I think has worked best in the past in Sedro-Woolley is smaller units that could be next to or in residential areas, because then they become part of the community as opposed to these big things that I don't think do so much. So could we like target specific areas, and of course the lack of land is a real problem, where we want to do it with the community and neighborhood support? And then if other people come in, and here's my question to you, and say, oh, you got this program, I want to do it here, and they just want to add to a place we don't want them at, we say no?
It's absolutely at the discretion of the city where multifamily tax exemption development is allowed.
Okay, good.
Question.
Yes, go ahead.
If the developer or property manager, whoever's handling it at the time, does not follow through with their full 8 years, 12 years, whatever their parameters are, and through audit are found to not be following those specific guidelines, what repercussions are left for the city, and how are the taxpayers refunded basically, or reallocated the funds that are then taken from them if this is supposed to be some sort of tax share situation in a city?
Absolutely. So there's multiple avenues for the audits. So first off, if there's overcharging of rent, or if you're having market rate rent where you promised affordable units, you can be charged a sliding scale penalty up to the amount of rent that was overcharged. In more severe situations, right, where there's bad faith non-compliance, your exemption can be canceled, and the value of the exemption you've received so far can be charged as a penalty. And if there's less of a severe amount, there's a plan of correction, right? You can be required to follow a corrective plan with a 6-month follow-up audit. And if that follow-up audit finds that there's still problems, then you can face those same penalties detailed earlier.
So it's only a look back penalty. It's not like, for example, like farmland, if you're to find out that you're not actually using your property for what it's actually zoned for, and you're taking that tax break. If the county comes and finds that out through their 3-month review or 3-year review, sorry, you then are required to a possible up to 7-year look back and pay in back taxes. But this doesn't allow for any of that. This is just simply a penalty. Am I understanding correctly or no?
In the case of bad faith noncompliance, you could be required to pay up to the whole value of the exemption you've received.
Okay. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Might have one more.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So this is geared towards the people that are moderate or low, and that's the 80 to 120% AMI is moderate.
80 to 115, yes.
115. So I guess it looks like the rents would be anywhere from 2,500 to 3,000 is kind of what you're aiming at. It'll change, of course, I'm sure, throughout the years, but we're offering a property tax exemption if they keep the rents within that level.
Yes, and you can calculate the AMI at the individual city level, not just for the entire county. So the Washington Center for Real Estate Research will provide yearly AMI totals for each city that you can use to customize at a local level. You can also, as a city, set more aggressive affordability targets, right? If you think 115, that's too high, that's not affordable for our community, you can say, well, it actually has to be 80% or less, right? Or it has to be 70% or less. You can slide that lower at your discretion as a council, right? Of course, it's a balance to try to find that, because if you set those requirements too aggressively, then there'll be no interest in the program because it won't be able to pencil. So it's a balance to try and set there.
Thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions? So, Catherine, I want to thank you very much for coming on. I'm going to turn this back over though to Tom. I don't know if he has anything he'd like to say or share at all.
Thank you. Yeah, if this is something that council would like for us to pursue, you don't have to decide that tonight. Maybe think it over. If that is something you'd like for us to pursue, we'd be happy to take that to planning commission and start working with them through the program. All those hoops. So, but like I said, you don't have to decide that tonight, or you can. But at some point, we'd like to have some direction.
Catherine, I do have one quick question. The slides that you showed, are those available to us? Are we able
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'll go ahead and send those over to your staff after this meeting, and they'll be able to distribute them to you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Of course.
Yes. All right. I think that is it. I hope you have a wonderful night. I don't know if it's snowing down in your area, but it is here.
Just
So
a few
stay safe.
flurries. All right. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too, Catherine. Good night. Next item on the agenda is just unfinished business. I had already sent the letter that we put together to send out to the governor. I wanted you to know that I also attached with it the letter that the council had signed. So we have got that going out to him. The tribe has also sent a pretty powerful letter, and I've been in conversation with Commissioner Janicki in the disappointing decision that may come where they may decide to go ahead and put Bess out here, just about a mile away from Sedro-Woolley. We're going to require and ask that they do extensive training for not only District 8, but for the city of Sedro-Woolley and all the fire districts that will be involved in anything that would ensue if a fire ensued. So we're doing that. We're trying to take steps. I don't know if there's anything else that you would like to see happen. I'm going to be down in Olympia. Both Councilman Burns and I are going to be down in Olympia the 19th and 20th. I've requested a meeting with the governor on the 19th. Don't know if it'll happen or not, but anyway, to discuss this with him as well. So is there anything else that you would like to see happen?
Can I ask a question? If that agency, and I can't remember its name, approves it, what is the next step in terms of any kind of appeal? And do we know, I haven't heard anything, or is anyone, neighbors, tribe, county considering legal action? I don't know, Nikki might know that.
Do you want to answer that, Nikki? Nikki's done online. Okay. Yeah. So we have considered it. We've had that discussion with you. We realize it is kind of out of our jurisdiction. We would hope that both the county and the tribe would come together and do that. And if they do, then we will probably come before you to see if you want to join forces with them to do that. But I do not believe that there is any kind of an appeal. I believe that once a decision is made, it is made. The reason the decision hasn't been made yet is because Inslee went out and the person that he appointed to that committee has to be reappointed by Ferguson. So, or he selects somebody new, whichever way it goes.
We do have somebody from Nikki's firm following the FSEC process very closely and kind of looking for those opportunities for us to potentially weigh in or intervene.
But we're doing what we can, even though they probably may not even give us a look because it's not our jurisdiction. Mile away, but not our jurisdiction.
But the governor can veto a decision.
Yes.
That's the reason we're pushing on the governor's office.
So, Madam Mayor, Mike, I do have a question regarding that. We're fighting pretty hard here in Sedro-Woolley, and we're one city, and it's the county too, it sounds like, trying to do that. Are we also fighting for any of the other counties? I mean, we don't want it in our backyard, but then are we fine to have it maybe go up to Clallam County or over to Jefferson or let them fight their own fight? Because it seems like this is a statewide initiative. From my discussion with Robert, they are aggressively going to place these around the state and in large number, like hundreds and hundreds of these.
Yeah, I have to, so that's a really good question. So certainly if we were to hear of another jurisdiction where we believe that where it's going in at is not acceptable, I mean, we're looking at Hanson Creek, we're looking at the river, our Skagit River, which has 4 major fish that spawn there. There's no other river in the state of Washington that does that. Our river impacts the farming that we do. We're the richest community as far as farmland. Really, I think probably close in the United States. I mean, we've just got an exceptional area here. I mean, this is something that we really want to preserve. I think what we're really pushing is that, number one, in fact, if you read the letter, you saw that asked specifically that they look for other forms of clean energy. But secondly, that it not be here because of the, if there were to be some sort of a fail within their system, the damage that's done here will fly in the face of everything that they're using to promote clean energy. So, I mean, it's going to damage so much stuff here that's clean energy that damages our community, damages our lifestyle, damages.
I was glad to see that in the letter too, because it's absolutely true. It's like, well, everything that you're fighting for with the fires that have already happened with the bus stations have basically caused more greenhouse gas, more toxic exposure, more groundwater seepage, ground seepage. They're trying to fight it than anything they're trying to fight and preventing. I mean, they're putting out way more than what we're going to contain in a matter of time.
And maybe just a point of interest. So Representative Larson was here on Tuesday, Congressman Larson, Rick Larson. And after we had our meeting regarding the topic of grants and whatnot, I did ask him the question, is Congress actually looking at other means of clean energy other than the battery plants because of how dangerous they are? And of course, it's kind of out of his realm, and he didn't have really an answer. He thought it was a great question, and encouraged us to pursue it within our state and within our area here. But anybody and everybody that I can talk to who's higher up the food chain than I am, that's what I'm going to do.
Well, there was a good point. So,
one of the things I was looking at in the letter that I like is, and something maybe we could have a further discussion on with, if you get a chance to talk together, is this isn't something that's good for our economic development, right? Like, sure, it'll provide a few union jobs to build it, and it'll be done, and those people all go away, they'll go somewhere else, and the initial excitement from the unions was, we're going to have union electricians, working close to home. Well, they're going to work close to home for about 3 months, and then they're going somewhere else. There are other avenues that don't necessarily meet the green energy requirement, like maybe not at that specific location, but another local location that we could bring jobs in with, and partner with PSE doing natural gas generators, stuff like that our grid relies heavily on to begin with. And then another thing, interestingly enough, talking about PSE, and they were the ones that admittedly sent the RFP out for this, is the school district is they're actually attacking them in a very interesting way by not allowing them an easement unless they keep this project a certain amount of miles away from any of their schools. So they actually went over that in one of their last meetings with PSE, and told them that they didn't want to grant them an easement. And I mean, if PSE is willing to do this to us, as and we're their customers, right? If they're willing to do this to us, then what steps can we take to you know, fight back against them if they're not being a good neighbor by trying to slam this in, you know, through FSEC and having, you know, a company like Tenasca come out here and do all this stuff, then, you know, what can we not give them that they may want as a private company that has a monopoly on our power source here?
That's a very good question. The first thing I think of is that, of course, it's in county jurisdiction. So I think I would pose that question to them.
Right.
Because I think that they probably have
Larger
more
units,
available, to avail from than we do. But that's certainly something that we can discuss, and we'll discuss. I think that's a very good point. Thank you.
Yes. This may have been said at one previous meeting, but does the PUD intake from Judy, I don't know how it works, the water intake, is it downriver from Hanson Creek or is it upriver? Because that seems to be, that would be another major factor to consider, because if the thing starts burning and pollutes Hanson Creek and it goes right into the river near where, you know, a big chunk of the county, including us, get their drinking water, I would think that would be a huge problem.
So I spoke with George Sedou today, and he's going to be coming to give a presentation. Is that a question you would like me to have?
Oh,
present?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, because that, to me, that's another reason to say, don't do it.
If I remember right, he was here and we did ask him that.
Yeah, I just can't remember the answer.
He said that they get enough offlow from the surrounding hills to not have to draw from that for an extended period of time, is what he said.
But they do pull from the river for the farmland, especially when they're in a drought situation and they need extra water. So wouldn't hurt to present it again.
His answer could get amended based on new information too.
Yeah, I just think that's concerning. Okay, so drinking. And also to one other point, I don't think that you need to make this in a letter, but in terms of clean energy, you know, Ross Dam and the dams is a great form of clean energy, right? We've been using them for decades, or at least Seattle has.
One thing that I was interested on is who owns PSC. Puget Sound Energy sounds local, but I'm under the impression that most of their shareholders, like the large shareholders of their corporation, are actually not in the United States. So they're pushing a change by a state agenda, but they're not really invested, you know, personally within this area besides employees. Is that something we can check in? Maybe I know we've invited Robert here over and over and over. You know, does he have any interest in actually showing up and speaking to us? We can ask him.
So I did ask him, and he isn't ready to come yet. So
is there PSC can PSC get a different representative that's willing to meet with us as a liaison for their company? Because that's what he is, right? He's a liaison for their company, but he's not willing to meet with the citizens.
Yeah.
So I wonder if we can petition them for another liaison that's willing to be more cooperative, at least for information.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could also, is there any chance we can get a copy of the tribe's response? That might be useful just to look
Oh,
at.
yeah, I can do that.
Oh, Joe's waiting.
Put my hand up as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry about that, Commissioner. Go ahead. Go ahead.
So this is all great discussion. Excuse me. What it comes down to is the fact of our location through a major power infrastructure. It has nothing to do with the fact that different politics are going on. It's simply for the fact that somebody's looking to locate a backup system on a major power grid, and you're not going to rebuild these power grids. They are where they are. They have easements. They have all these different, let's just say, privileges that you're not going to take away easements from Seattle City Polite, Bonneville Power Administration. They all go through the valley for very, very engineering reasons. And it's unfortunate that this particular entity decided that they want to do a lithium plant right outside on the flats that we know floods. And if it goes on fire, Yeah, well, we will be under toxic kind of all kinds of things. So I so get it. But at the end of the day, it's because of the grid. And we are there at the grid. It's not going to be in Jefferson County. We are the valley. This is where all this infrastructure goes through. It not only just goes through Skagit, it goes through Stillaguamish, goes through all the different areas heading into the more populated areas. So I would say is let's just sit back, take a deep breath, and target how we want to take this project and either needs to get scaled down, okay, or maybe get relocated in different aspects where it's not so sensitive to flooding, to what we have as a way of life, of our waterways and things like that. There's options on that side. But what they're proposing right now, you're absolutely right. We want to push back on that as much as we can, but it's all about the grid. So if it takes them another, let's say, half a mile to go to the left, okay, that they're up at a place that they're not going to flood, we know what's coming on in, let's try and get it scaled back. It's Highway 20. That's where they're going down, and that's where it's at. We do not want this project sitting on top of the river in the flats. Let's pick our battles. We know what's coming our way, but at least let's pick our battles to figure out, can it be more intelligent? Thank you for answering by shaking my head. And again, I apologize for being late for this meeting. You know, yeah, that's not me, but I get it. It's a big deal here, but it's about our infrastructure, and it's tough to move. We don't move it. We don't move it at all. We defend it like for everything.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Yes.
Yeah,
Councilman
thank you,
Lavaca.
Madam
Mhm.
Mayor. Just in response to that, Joe, part of the challenge is it's unnecessary because it's a backup for the grid, but we have
Agree.
not needed that backup all this time.
Agree.
It's only
100%
because
agree.
of new regulation or green energy that this is coming about. So it's absolutely unnecessary. We have energy, we have power. They don't need to put battery banks around the entire Washington area.
100% agree. Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I agree. It was something that Jay Inslee put in 3 or 4 years ago, right? That they needed a backup to make affordable power for the cities when we get really hot weather, that all of a sudden that power's got to go down the line. But you still have to, it's not just where that battery backup is. It still needs to hit that grid to, you know, that still needs to be able to handle that power inflow back and forth. It looks great on paper, I guess, for a lot of people, but I agree with you 1000%. And none of us were really aware of this until maybe about 6 or 7 months ago. That was like a wowzer. And boy, the only people that I've ever seen show up for council meetings was to get really passionate about what does not work here. Yeah.
True. Thank you, Commissioner. Is there anybody else who has any comments? Yes, go ahead,
Just real
Councilman.
quick, the thing that most concerns me, quite frankly, is if it catches on fire, then our firefighters will have to respond to it. I drove all around it in every neighborhood, and it's not like there's nobody there. There's a large mobile home park literally right next to the site. There's houses around it, and they're supposed to shelter in place. I mean, the whole idea of this siting, whether you are opposed to the technology or not, where it is ridiculous. I just have to say that.
Very true. An inappropriate place.
It's not, I don't think it's safe.
Lithium cannot be put out by water. It continues to burn.
Right.
It's like throwing water on magnesium. And I think that our fire chief department, which are double thumbs up, yeah, we need to get them involved as well. We would not be able to put out a fire on lithium.
Well, the guy
Lithium's
from the
metal, man.
company
It
said
just
they just
burns.
burn.
Yeah, it throws off toxic, and our winds come out of the east. Yeah. We're fighting for our lives right here, right now, people, by the way.
Okay, thank you. So is there any other comments, or are we ready to move on to new business? New business, okay, it is. All right, looking on new business, we have the land capacity analysis, and I believe, is this you, Tom? Yes, okay. Mhm.
So tonight we have with us, Facet. The Facet team has been working on, putting together a land capacity analysis for us, and Matt is here to provide us with a presentation on just that very thing. So take it away, Matt.
Thank you, Tom. And thank you, Mayor and council persons and Planning Commission members. I am here virtually. I'm here in spirit. So I'm going to be, this is actually a great kind of the battery storage discussion. Skipping back to the commerce discussion on MFTE, this is kind of a good that was kind of a good lead into this, because we're kind of going to be touching on some of those issues that the commerce planner brought up. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So I'm going to be doing going over kind of three key things. Let me know when you can see this. Should be seeing it shortly. Everybody see that?
Yep.
Fantastic. So just going to kind of reorient you all to the schedule and where we're at. Then I'm going to talk about kind of three main pieces of this. This is kind of the crux of the comprehensive plan update. You know, really what you're doing in kind of plain English in a comp plan update is you're trying to plan for growth and change over a 20-year period, and that means that you've got to figure out how much capacity you have to accommodate future growth, and then make changes in your maps and in your code and in your policies to support any changes that might be needed if you're falling short of projected growth. That's one of the primary functions of the comprehensive plan. So I'll be talking about that, the results of the land capacity analysis and how those play into the housing conversation. You have a responsibility to plan for projected growth in your land use element and then the comp plan broadly, but then you also have this additional responsibility because of recent changes to the Growth Management Act to get a little more granular when it comes to housing. And that ties in nicely with what we heard from the commerce staff earlier. And then we'll also segue into some potential map code policy program changes that we're kind of discussing, and the pros and cons of some of the different approaches to try to accommodate your housing allocations and show that you have the capacity to meet the projected growth. And then we'll have some questions before moving on to the second piece of our discussion tonight, which Marina is here for that. That's on the vision statement. So this red line here on this schedule is where we're at now. As you can see, we're really in that task 7, that big block of tasks down at the bottom. That's all the draft elements. So the land use, housing. We've got proposed changes to the land use element that you all will be starting to see in the next several meetings. And we've also been, by virtue of some of the housing analysis that we've been doing in collaboration with staff, have some kind of different approaches that the city can take to meet its housing obligations. And then other elements that we're working on with the city include transportation, capital facilities, parks and recreation, and we'll be rolling out some proposed updates to those elements in the coming couple of months as we wrap up work on those. Note here, I've got that star in the upper right of the screen says that the schedule only goes out to June 30th. That's the deadline for getting funds dispersed from Department of Commerce, but the actual deadline to adopt is December 31st. So as long as we've got the draft, a bunch of draft plan material done by June 30th, there's quite a bit of time left in the remainder of the year to work through the elements if things are kind of if there's still some pain points and some issues that need addressing, and make some refinements before hopefully adopting before the end of December. So moving on to kind of the land capacity analysis, you had some numbers, some kind of spreadsheet outputs in your packet. The land capacity analysis is something that every fully planning jurisdiction has to do for the Growth Management Act. You have to show how much capacity you have under your current zoning to meet your projected population and employment, projected population and projected jobs within the 20-year planning period. So for you, that's out to 2045. Population is easier than employment. We're going to not have to deal with employment at this meeting, which is good, because this is in many ways easier, at least from a kind of understanding demographics and population change standpoint. But the very curated version of this table, this is by zone in the city of Sedro-Woolley. There's kind of two different categories of land that we can say has capacity. There's vacant and then there's partially vacant, which means there's something on it that has more than $10,000 in improvement value, but it's underdeveloped under its current zoning. And then we have to apply a couple kind of reduction factors to account for things like individual property owners not wanting to develop, or just general, it's called a market factor. That just basically means that there are some properties that, even though they have capacity, they will not be developed within the planning period for one reason or another. Sometimes it's literal market forces. Sometimes it's just, somebody doesn't want to sell. They want to keep a house in the family or something. Then we have to deduct for infrastructure. So even though at an individual site level, you're not going to have to take 15% off the top of your capacity, when you look at the whole zone, you can kind of say that, oh yeah, we've got to provide stormwater retention facilities, and we've got to provide access tracks and open space and et cetera, et cetera. So there's this number that's just the gross number in that fourth column, that total column. And then you have to apply those couple of deductions, and then you get your kind of your final housing units. Suffice it to say, Sedro-Woolley has capacity for 2,016 housing units across all the different zones. This is a change from the current adopted comp plan. The land capacity analysis that was done for that back in 2015, for a variety of good reasons, did not assign any residential capacity to the commercial zones. And in part, that's because the overlays were, I believe, adopted as part of that comp plan. And so that was not reflected at the time. But regardless, 2016, that's where you're at. That's after applying those deductions, which has enough capacity in theory to accommodate 4,988 people, which is in excess of your population target, which is great. However, so that's just the raw kind of housing units number. The second piece of it, and this is where things get complicated, is that the city, just like all fully planning cities and counties, has to also show that you have enough capacity to provide, in theory, to provide housing that's affordable to all economic segments of the community. And that's broken out by these income brackets. So when we talk about like income bands or income ranges, we're talking about these numbers. You've heard them frequently. You heard some tonight about MFTE. We're talking about percentages of the area median income. And the city and the other cities and the county, Skagit County, went through a process to use that HAPT tool that Commerce developed, and work through allocating housing units for these different income brackets to the different communities. This is just a snapshot of that allocation just for the city, and I've got the UGA on here as well, because that's how it shows up in the table from the Council of Governments allocation. But that number circled there, you see there, that's that in the black line, 2,360 housing units. Now, it doesn't take a super sleuth to see that 2,360 is bigger than 2016. This is very common. So when you account for all of the income bands, that number in many cases adds up to greater than your capacity. That happens all the time. However, we also get to look at what has happened, because those allocations are for 2020 to 2045, I believe, and the The city in the past 5 years has actually permitted 400 plus housing units that have actually reduced that number that you have to plan for to 1,909, which is great. But the thing that gets extra complicated is that you have to look at your different zones and the types of housing that is permitted in those zones and the different development regulations that constrain development in different ways, and assign sort of theoretical capacities for those different income brackets to the current zones that you have. So, you've got, in R5 versus R7, there's different blends of housing types and densities that will get developed, and there'll be barely any housing that's affordable to people making under 80% in R5. There'll be there's some in R7, there's more in R15. And so what you end up with is a situation, frequently this happens, you're definitely not alone, where you're on the whole, your big number looks good, right? Oh, we've got capacity for 2016 units. And we only need to plan for another 1,909. We have a surplus of 107 units. Well, not really, because what ends up happening is that when you look at it zone by zone, you actually end up with a situation where you've got a deficit of around 850 units affordable to people making 80% or less of the area median. And you've got surpluses actually in the 80 to 120 and the 120+% of area median, which kind of all adds up to this number where you say, oh, we've got a surplus, but you actually have a deficit of kind of lower income units and a surplus of moderate and higher income units. This is very normal. You look at that number, oh my God, 850 units. How are we ever going to do that? Well, a couple things. I think we talked about this the joint session back in last year, but I will point out that the city does not have to actually account for building those specific units at those affordability ranges. You just have to show that you have the capacity in your zoning and in your development regulations and in your policies and programs to help provide to in theory accommodate those housing units. So you don't have to say, like, you're not going to have to submit a report to the state that says, like, oh yeah, we actually did build 851 affordable units over a 20-year period. You just have to show that you have the capacity for it. So in some ways it's a paper exercise, but the point of this is that you're looking at kind of your existing affordability challenges and then your future affordability challenges and trying to figure out how you can change your development regulations and programs over the next 20 years to try to close that gap. It's an important goal, but it is complicated because it does kind of, you can be good on capacity, but short on allocations. And that's the situation that you and dozens of other cities fall into. So that's kind of your capacity versus allocations. You've got a deficit of around 850 units for people for low income and very low income households. Moderate income households, you have a surplus of 700 plus units and 200 plus units for people making over 120%. So that's, that would be like single family detached owned homes. Now, again, sounds like a scary number. There are several different ways to go about this. And communities can kind of get to choose different approaches that can help, we make some map changes, we make some changes to our zoning code, we adopt some new kind of programs like MFTE, for example, or other things. And you kind of take all those together and you say, yes, we have this deficit. Here are the things we're doing to close those gaps. So those kind of fall into those three buckets, right? There's map changes, that's rezones, changes in your land use designations, changes in where zones are located on the map, changing from a lower density to a higher density zone usually, or potentially from a residential to a mixed use. And then there's code changes. These two things often go together. So that would be like changing your development regulations for one of your current zones or multiple current zones to create more capacity within those zones. So that might be something like creating a density incentive in your R15 zone to allow in some cases, density bonuses for creating affordable units or something like that. Or your ADU code changes that you have to do to comply with House Bill 1337 would kind of fall into that category, where it's not a map change, but it does actually create capacity that doesn't exist now within your current zones. And then the last one is program changes. So these are things like funding mechanisms, policies for donation of surplus land, direction for the city to form partnerships with nonprofit housing developers, just for a few examples. And most communities like you will probably end up doing sort of a mix of these things. I heard during the MFTE discussion, people talking about, that MFTE, it could be useful, but there's issues of perception of people kind of feeling a certain way about developers, and then in some cases, in some ways, like just doing it through your regulations and your maps is a little simpler. And that's kind of this discussion, this balance that we're trying to help the city work to here. So just for a few examples, we worked with staff to kind of figure out a few places where you could create several hundred new units of capacity, including a decent amount that you could consider as that below 80% target on your current map. So we just kind of looked at some areas that might be candidates for a zoning map change. And we took this, let me go back. I did this exercise where I kind of looked at what the land that had capacity within those areas, and kind of we looked at, okay, so if there were some areas that are R7 currently that the city may want to consider upzoning to R15, or potentially create a new zone somewhere between 7 and 15. Just for a couple of examples, we tried to balance out that acreage where we'd say, well, we want to have, you've got a bunch of R5 north in the northern part of the city. We tried to say, okay, let's try to balance if we're looking at potentially some rezones of R7 to R15, for example, some equivalent acreages roughly of land with capacity of R5 going to R7. Just as an example, this isn't a final draft of any sort. This is just kind of an example of some changes that you could make. There's also opportunities here to talk about, if we're talking about code changes, which I'll get to that in a second, but I mentioned creating like a different, like an overlay or a new zone between R7 and R15. If you look at this map here, there's a couple places where that could maybe be appropriate near the central business district. And then you could also then maybe consider you've got a big chunk of this R15 property here south of the central business district, but the CBD zone has actually had quite a bit of single family units developed in it over the past 5 years. And so if you're looking at, okay, well, if we're changing from R7 to something else, can we make some tweaks to the R15 zone to try to get more of the kind of planned capacity out of that zone, instead of, it was about 2/3 multifamily and 1/3 single family over the past 5 years. So just some opportunities to tweak that within your existing zoning. Other code changes, like I said, the ADU code changes, loosening up your ADU regulations in compliance with state law, that will create, and you can actually count ADU capacity toward that 80% and below target. So that's one advantage of potentially rezoning some areas from R5 to R7, is that will create some additional density within those areas. That also creates additional capacity for ADUs, for new homes being built that are suddenly allowed to have 2 ADUs. Not all of them will, of course, but you could get a decent number of ADUs that you could use to kind of account for that 80% and below target. You'd increase the number of ADU capacity in that area by changing it from R5 to R7, for example. You can also look at we did an analysis on your housing regulations, looking at things like parking, height limits, other things that can result in projects not getting built at zone capacity for one reason or another. And then, like I mentioned, you could actually, this is a zone change or code change and a map change, but you could actually create a new zone or a new overlay. So if you're talking about trying to get more out of your R15 area, you could maybe focus some of those R7 areas on something that's more in like a 12 dwelling units an acre or something that could be that's a good density for townhomes, for example, but not so much for like multifamily. So just some examples of some ways that you can kind of look at this. And then program and policy changes. So these are things where you need to have, policies within the comp plan to support this and then direct the city to pursue these things. There's several different examples, donate a program to like donate city-owned land or offer like low-cost ground leases to nonprofit housing developers. A property tax levy. I think you already have a sales tax program, I believe, but there's additional fiscal tools that are at your disposal. And then, of course, the MFDE program is also an example of a program or policy change that you could use. You kind of pull all these different levers and you show the state, hey, we're doing these things, we're targeting these income brackets because we know we have an issue here, and we're doing our level best to close the gap. That's basically the best case scenario is that you take a look at some different ways of looking at this and come up with an approach that makes sense for Sedro-Woolley and that you can use to show the state like, hey, we've got this deficit for 80% and below. Here's the different things that we're doing to help close that gap. And that's ultimately the goal, is to kind of get you a compliant comp plan that does what you have to do for land use and housing in the purposes of this discussion, and that also is done your way, right? So it's not just, you're not just like, oh, we're not just going to like rezone everything to 20 dwelling units an acre, because that wouldn't make sense for you, obviously. We're doing a kind of picking these different approaches and targeted approaches that are right for you. So that's all that I had. I know that Tom and Nicole and Ashton and the other planning staff have also come up with a lot of really good ideas that you can kind of lean on them and lean on us as kind of an extension of your team to, if you've got additional ideas or questions, happy to answer questions. And also if you have any suggestions on programs or ideas, policies, map changes that we are not, this is just kind of a first draft, some low-hanging fruit. We're all ears, because we want to be coming to you guys in the next couple months with a set of policy and potential map changes that you can start to chew on.
Thank you, Matt. Are you willing to take questions, or you want us to defer to Tom or Nicole or Ashton?
I'd be happy to take a few questions.
Are there any questions for Matt? Yes, go ahead, Councilman.
There are.
Yeah, thank you very much, Matt. Appreciate the info. Yeah, it seems pretty important. So it's basically like we need 850 homes pretty much for that low income bracket. But we're good on the other ones. We're developing a plan, and that plan, does it mean in the comprehensive plan we'd actually have to go through with the rezone? And that's question one. And if we do have to rezone, the council, through wisdom, of course, and we want that, forfeited all rights to say like, well, we really don't want an apartment right here, but let's do one right here. If it's an R15 and they meet all the check boxes within the planning department, they can legally build that, and the council's removed ourselves from that for legal reasons.
Mm-hmm.
But if we rezone just to accommodate a plan, couldn't technically developers come in and just build away at that?
Well, I think it's really up to you. So if I'm understanding you correctly, you made multifamily development an administrative decision within the R15 zone, and that makes that they don't have to go to a hearing. You've removed yourself from that decision-making environment. I think there's so many different ways you could do it, right? If you created a new zone, for example, just to kind of pick one, if you were like, oh, we need some more differentiation between kind of the single family and the higher density multifamily, you could develop an administrative conditional use approach or something where it's appealable to the hearing examiner, and there are standards that the council adopts through an ordinance, but it wouldn't necessarily go to hearing. There's also, if you did just if you did just a map change and you did just, we're going to rezone all this stuff from R7 to R15, then under your current code would apply, and a developer could say, oh, well, I used to be able to only get, 4 single family homes in this lot. Now I can get 12 apartments, and they would be able to do that based on your current code. But what's in your current code and what level of kind of discretion you give yourself versus the director is kind of up to the council. And I think the goal for, when you're looking at, the goal is to get enough theoretical capacity for this lower income housing units. It doesn't necessarily have to be a multifamily. It can also be things like Habitat for Humanity, which often provides homes, ownership programs for people making like 50%. So that would count in that bucket. So that's just another kind of, partnership or another kind of avenue or direction that you can take on this. In terms of what's in the code and how it gets built from an entitlement standpoint, that's really up to you. The goal is to kind of, make it not put additional hurdles in the way of getting that additional capacity for people that make below 80% AMI. But in terms of where that applies and how that applies, that's up to the city. That's up to you guys.
Thank you very much. It does seem like a tough one because the only option seems to be densifying, and we've looked at that because we're pretty full. We've pushed back on the GMA, of course, or
Commissioner Batisi?
Thank you. So while I appreciate your presentation, I definitely have an issue with where you're getting your numbers from. So if a lot of us not only know our zoning that we've spent pretty much for my own self, like well over a decade ad nauseum, going through every square inch, right down to our sanitation capabilities, transportation, and everything in between. I appreciate your effort here. The city of Sedro-Woolley is very unique, just for the fact of where we're at. So I looked at some of your immediate spreadsheets. I know every piece of dirt that's R15. I have no idea where you're getting your numbers from. And all I'm saying right now to the mayor and council, we're maxed right now. Let it get incorporated of what we've already done to incorporate our housing. And we are at a growth phase right now that we're just putting massive projects online in our UVMU and everything else. And there are people right now with pitchforks, with everybody here on this council, saying, I can't even get from point A to point B simply for the fact that we don't have the transportation infrastructure. So I get what the state is saying, what they would like, but I'm just going to tell you, it's not a one size fits all. We get the numbers. And if we're all going to work together until the mayor fires me and throws my ass off that planning commission, I know my numbers. I know my zones. I know my transportation right down to the capacity that we have on our sewer plan. So all I'm saying is this. We are required in 2025 to get our 10-year comp plan update done in compliance with the GMA. And we will do that. But we also need to take into effect of everything we've already done to make that stuff happen. See, originally, and I think right now we're about, Mayor, I think we're over 14,000. So the state, about there, right? So the state brought us down to like require 17,000. Okay, we have certain kind of things that let us take what we've already done, okay? And then we'll take a look at what we have to do in 2025 to make things work for the livability. But no, I will tell you, sir, we are not going to force massive density down our throats right now. And that is my opinion right now, if it's not in a controlled manner. And right now we have to eat what's on our plate. And our plate right now is full. And our development community is doing an excellent, awesome job on it. So I get our 2025 mandate and I'm all in. But I need to back you off a little bit. So you need to start talking to us when you start throwing these numbers up. We understand more than anybody. So thank you. And I apologize if I came across in a strong way. I'm from Jersey. It's not going to change. Just saying.
I don't know.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Councilman Henderson.
Yeah, so has our target growth changed since we started doing this comp plan? We need to account for, we're at 14,000, we need to account for 17,000 and some change by 2045?
That's correct. Yeah, that hasn't changed.
Okay, and so, and I tend to agree a lot with that, you know, what Joe just said, but can you explain to me how density equals affordable?
Well, that is one of the big kind of mysteries, and frankly, one of the when I said that in many ways this is like a paperwork exercise for the state. There are a set of assumptions that go into when you show the state that you think you have the capacity or that you're doing things to show that you have the capacity. There's a bunch of assumptions about different housing types that are allowed in different zones, and zones that are predominantly single family automatically go into the bucket when you show like your capacity. It automatically goes into the bucket of 120+% AMI, because the state believes, and I think they're right, that in most parts of the state, whatever the median income is for that area, most at this point single family homes are not affordable to people making less than 120% of the median household income. And that's most likely true in Sedro-Woolley. It's true most places across the state, especially in Western Washington. So what you don't have to show that you have a like specific plan to build that exact number of affordable units. You simply have to show that within zones that allow multifamily, predominantly, you can also do things, like I said, through policy where you say like, oh yeah, Habitat for Humanity, ground lease for Habitat for Humanity for a project, whatnot. That would get toward that 80% and below target. But you just have to show that you have the capacity or are creating through this plan the theoretical capacity in zones that allow multifamily. So that kind of does not get at that question of whether those units are actually affordable. And I think you will probably be relieved to hear that you don't have to show that what gets built is actually affordable. It's one of, like I said, it's kind of a silly paperwork exercise because the state makes you go through all this kind of, compliance stuff and show that, do your homework and show all this stuff. But, does it actually get built? That is entirely up to the market and your development community. And I mean, there's a little bit, the city can pull levers, right? You are not powerless in this, but in many ways, what actually gets built, you don't have a ton of control over.
Right. So I completely understand that we have to show capacity, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when we're being asked to change from R7 to R15 zoning and a lot of our R7, and I mean it's not a silly exercise when that's on the plate now, right?
For sure.
When we're being asked to do that in order to pass our comp plan is densify all these different areas. And I'm looking at the map that's provided and it's just scattered all over the place. Like it doesn't even make sense to me. Right. So if this is the direction that we're going and we have to pass this before the end of the year, we need to really hunker down and have these discussions. Because I can tell you right now, I'm not going to vote to just densify everything just so we can get a plan approved and say, see, we're theoretically showing capacity, but it's not theoretical anymore because we actually rezoned everything and opened the doors up to us just getting absolutely overrun without our infrastructure being taken care of and put in place to allow that kind of a growth.
Yeah, no, I totally hear that, and gets to Commissioner Fatizzi's point as well. Part of the other part of the comp plan that this is just different general approaches to solving your capacity issue. There are a bunch of other things within the GMA that you are required to show that you have the capital facilities to service that growth. That's another big part of this. And not just that, but a 6-year financing plan, your capital facilities plan, to ensure that that priority projects get built that will help service that growth. There is actually the GMA actually says that explicitly that if you cannot create the capital facilities, that's things like roads, sewer, stormwater, variety of other things. If you can't create those, don't have a good financing plan to create those services, you have to revisit your land use element. So you don't. There is an out here. I mean, if you can truly demonstrate that you cannot, within the 20-year planning period, provide the capital facilities to service that growth, then that enters a kind of a discussion with the state where you kind of revise that. You can say like, okay, so then we have to go back to our land use map and we can't do some of these things, and you show that. And so that there's some leeway there, basically.
Isn't that where we should start? Isn't that where we should start? Is our capital projects and our capacity in that manner, and say, hey, this is what we can handle as a city. Now let's see how many more people we can take on, right? And then the very last thing we look at is, in order to pass this plan, in order to show capacity at the 11th hour, maybe we might need to start looking at redensifying some of our zoning. Shouldn't we? I mean, I may be completely missing the mark here, but isn't that where we should start?
Perfectly reasonable question. Perfectly reasonable question. You know, the way the GMA is set up is that the land use element is supposed to drive everything else in the plan, and the idea being that you have to account for, you have to be able to show that you are planning for the growth that is expected to occur and that you have the facilities in place to service that growth. But that's kind of generative, because part of the conversation, I mean, we're talking with Bill at Public Works and the other, facets within the city government to work on the capital facilities element as we speak. Your transportation consultant is taking a look at the land capacity information and kind of your projected growth and doing kind of a transportation analysis of where shortfalls are going to occur. So this is ongoing at the moment. It's a parallel. It's a bit of a parallel process, but the land use element is kind of designed in law and the way that you kind of have to do the comp plan, that you have to lead with that. And then the job of the city, the public works folks, transportation folks, is to figure out a way to, whether it's through like demand management stuff or additional, new transportation infrastructure, or a wide range of tools that you can accommodate that growth and not let, intersections fall below the levels of service identified in your plan. At that point, if you still can't make that work with, looking at all the tools and levers that the city has at its disposal, then you can kind of go back and reassess. But it's a great question. The way it's set up in law is that you start with the land use element. The idea being that you don't, if every community said, well, currently we don't have sewer capacity to handle anywhere near that amount of growth, so we can't make that change to our land use element, you'd end up with some inadequate sewer facilities all over the state within several years, because you wouldn't be making the investments needed to service the growth at a statewide level. So it's a statewide problem, but expressed locally, it does make sense to look at capital facilities simultaneously, and we are doing that.
Thank you.
Not to interrupt, Commissioner DeVoyne's had a question for a while now.
Commissioner Patisi, actually, Commissioner DeVoyne had his hand up. So
That's exactly what I said. He's had a question for a while. I was just sticking up for Matt. Would have put my hand down. Yes, he's had his hand raised for a while.
Thank you for your presentation. I'm trying to follow your charts and making my head spin. But can you go back to the presentation, please?
You want me to go back to the presentation? Yes.
And slide number 4.
Slide 4. Okay, let me go back there just a second.
I think that's it.
Yes. Okay.
share the screen.
There you go. It's sharing right now.
Thank you. I'm trying to follow this. If I take the total lots available minus rocket patch direction, minus infrastructure direction, should I get the final housing units available for the top row 1331 minus 1032 minus 744? Should that equal 744, the final housing unit column?
That's a great question, Commissioner. So there are rows in here that are, or formulas in the spreadsheet that are not shown. Those are the reduction factors. So the reduction factor, this isn't like the amount that you take off the total. The reduction factor is like a multiplier in a formula in the spreadsheet, and it's based on kind of market studies of real estate and assumptions about infrastructure, the percentage of a site that's going to have, or the percentage throughout the whole zone that's going to have to be provisioned for roads and access tracks and stuff. So it's actually it's a fraction that gets reduced off the top. So when you add up all of the acreage, which is also not shown here because I didn't have enough rows to show you, and it would get really confusing. So I just have the number of, this is all units up until the very end. There's other pieces to this. Land capacity analysis is like a GIS thing where we take assessor data and zoning data and critical areas data, and you come up with these numbers of acres, and then you have to multiply those by the zoned density of those zones to come up with this number. These numbers are the number of units within each zone. When you do that multiplication, right? Number of acres times the density assumptions for the zone, you get these numbers, and that adds up to this. So this is the 1331 is the sum of vacant and partially vacant. When up to after this point, there is a ratio that's applied. I believe it's a different market factor for single family versus multifamily or mixed use. And basically there's an assumption that somewhere between 15 and 25% of lots in that zone, for one reason or another, will not develop within the planning period, even if they have capacity. So this number is a fraction, I think it's 85% of this number.
Okay.
And then once you get past that point, then you have a number that is this number, right? This is once you take that reduction based on that fraction. You have to then reduce that further because the gross density of the site is not actually what's going to get built, because you have to do stormwater, you have to do roads, you have to do easements, open space tracts, and that is this last number. And these two are the same just because I just repeated it because it has a different column heading. It's the deduction gets you here, but then that is sort of your final number for the zone. And then that's just multiplied by the average household size for the city to get the population, the population capacity. So it starts here, you reduce it by a fraction, you reduce it by another fraction, then you get these numbers. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Henderson? Do you have another question?
I do.
Oh,
Me? I didn't have my hand up.
Councilman Brett?
First, I'll say, Matt, I know we hired you to do a job and I appreciate it. This is not directed at you. I think this is a stupid way to plan a city, what they're asking us to do, and requiring that we make this intense densification, essentially relegating anyone who makes less than 120% AMI to living in an apartment for the rest of their life. Is kind of what they're boxing them into. And I don't like it because when you build in this way, you essentially perpetuate that into the future. So I have a couple questions in relation to that. Can we require, if we densify some of these areas, that they be condos and not apartments?
I don't believe you can require that. But there are a number of different ways that you can pull levers in your zoning code to encourage smaller single family, whether that's condo or townhouses or cottages, units that are going to be more affordable. Whether those are going to be able to be counted toward that 80% number, I think depends on your approach to some of the other policies that you might have. So for example, if you lean hard into stuff like something like, for example, Habitat for Humanity, or, you know, offering low cost or no cost ground leases to nonprofit developers that build cottage housing that's affordable to people making 50%, to get like super specific, right? If you had a policy in your comp plan that directed the city to pursue that partnership, that would help you with that number without having to have you rezone for all apartments. I agree. I mean, I hear you. I agree with you. I think it is the way that they've kind of set out this housing stuff is silly, and it's in many ways it's just kind of like, I mean, it's in tension with your requirement to plan for your population growth, because in some cases you actually end up having to plan for more growth than your population growth would account for, which is pretty silly. And also, yeah, there are a number of ways to kind of get at the affordability aspect of this without building apartments. And I think that's why I said that there are a bunch of different approaches that you can take. You can do rezones where it makes sense, but you do not have to. And I mean, I think you may find it challenging to show that you're making up that whole gap without any zoning changes. We haven't looked into it in that great a detail yet, but there are a number of different things that you guys can do to promote ownership for people on fixed incomes or people making less than 80%. Like I said, cottage housing development, townhouses. In some cases, townhouses are usually more in that like moderate income category. But if you were to pair, so for example, like I said, you could create a new zone that was focused on townhouses, or you could take R15 and really focus it on townhouses, because you did actually get a bunch of townhouses built in your R15 zone in the past 5 years. If you really focused that on townhouses and also had a bunch of programs or code changes in your code and in your comp plan to support making those affordable to people making less than 80%, you could count that. There's nothing to say you can't. Kind of the default option that is kind of assumed in all of this with the state guidance is rezones, but there's a bunch of other stuff you can do too. And I don't limit yourselves to just thinking, I mean, I know I can hear there's a lot of opposition to just blanket rezones of your whole city, which I totally agree. The map that I put in there was some ideas that I threw out there to just kind of do an intellectual exercise to show like, hey, if you balanced out, these rezones, you could end up with X number of theoretical units of capacity. So it's a tool, but it is by no means the only tool. And I think you have a lot of levers that you can pull.
Well, I definitely like us to do anything that we can that would direct the future building that's happening as much as possible towards things that people are going to have a stake in, whether it be a condo, townhouse. I understand we have to build something that's more affordable, but at least build something that's more likely that a person's going to be able to purchase it and have that stake in it when they're sticking around. The other question I have before I let you move on is the urban growth area expansion. Is that something that we could petition for, essentially saying we don't have the area necessary for us to do the growth that you're asking for without densifying beyond the abilities of the city to handle? And then the roads coming into the city, we rely on outside entities to give us the ability to exit Sedro-Woolley, and they are not doing upgrades to that infrastructure, one of them being a state route that is hampering the ability to actually get people in and out of the city. So really, they're asking us to do something that they're not giving us the ability to achieve.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'm going to throw this map up here for a second. So let's avert your eyes from the black lines where I drew potential acreages for rezones, and let's just focus on the pink hash mark, which is your urban growth area. You actually, this is another kind of weird quirk of GMA planning, is that you don't get to count land within your UGA that is not within the city limits toward your capacity. But by the end of the planning period, the idea behind your urban growth area is that all the area that's, you adopt a plan looking out 20 years, all of the area that's within your urban growth area is supposed to be designed to be incorporated within the planning period, at which point that would become capacity for the city. So, which is kind of just a weird quirk of the way GMA works. Right now, Skagit County gets to count the area within your UGA toward its acreage because you guys don't control it. But once it is annexed, then you do control it. And so what I would say to you is that if you're and sounds like your building community is sounding like, that there are limitations to, practical limitations on what's left within town, which, I totally makes sense. If the city kind of begins there would need to be support for this, policy support in the comp plan. But if you start making plans to do additional annexations, you can have that listed as long as you are kind of keeping your housing targets in mind when you're looking at what the designations and zones are going to be when they get incorporated. If you have within your comp plan direction to the city to pursue like specific areas for annexation, to enter into annexation agreements with the county, you could use that as a way of addressing some of your housing shortfall. So it's a weird thing where it's like we can't show it in your capacity now, but if you can show a plan for how to get there, you can have that be part of the solution. It's unlikely, given the size of your UGA, that a UGA expansion would pass muster. But it is there, and it is kind of yours to incorporate as makes sense financially and politically for the city. And that's something that we can kind of support in the plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Commissioner Fatisi?
So we put that in for our last 10-year update, and the Skagit County SCOG knocked that down. Okay, and right now our code absolutely incorporates everything that you spoke about to incorporate that growth to 17,000 people. So we absolutely propose the expansion, but there's a whole lot of really practical reasons why that didn't happen 10 years ago. And I believe I've been on this planning commission now since 2014, going on 12 years. We've hit every possible way, okay? Instead of hitting the density inside, going from our single families, whatever, to provide different types of housing that we don't want the high density. So we went with the expansion, and that got knocked down. It'll get knocked down again. So back to the calculations that Matt brought up on your R5. So if you take 43,560 feet and divide by 5, I'm starting to get numbers, and I'm looking at this whole number of 1,000 plus just on an R5. We don't have that. So the numbers that you're looking at, and this is the problem of being a planning commissioner, just because we plan something and we put it in code doesn't mean you can do it, because it's not a flat map in Sedro-Woolley, the Valley, or any place else. Once you get off of Highway 20, you go up Township, you're going on up. We have a whole bunch of contours that, even though that map shows that you have this density, you don't have the water, you don't have the sanitation capacity. So there's a whole bunch of things. And for the rest of the mayor and council, yeah, we've been beating this to death for a while. And right now we're trying to and it's like people that actually show up in planning commission meetings, the ones that do that, they bring up really good points that we have flooding in certain situations, that what we have right now is so unique that yeah, we're clear on what we need to do for our 2025 comp plan update. This would be my own third one, and I'm not being a jerk here, whatever. But this is not a lot of our first rodeo, and we totally get what you're saying. But also, I'm listening to every other council member here, and I'm just going to tell you right off the bat, we've been there, done that, beat it to death. And yeah, now we got to come up with a plan, and we tried, and we have been very successful in doing up zones at different places. UVMU. We got a whole bunch of good density in there. And yes, there's a lot of available space in there to get that up to date. But we have a whole bunch of other challenges as well. Transportation. People here, even though it's urban village, yeah, it's great if you walk, but we're 5 miles in from any major, any place. So we have very specific issues to the city of Sedro-Woolley, as well as being constrained by critical areas. Now we have a lithium plant supposedly going in the valley. We have a situation. So let's say you have a seismic event on Mount Baker. Take a look at what we need to deal with, that we need to plan ahead and not be what happened to Southern California in the latest catastrophes what they've had. And we have the same stuff going on here in a different level. So all of us, we need to be responsible when we do this update. And Julia, I've talked to you about this. What would happen if we have something of some type of event somewhere that we need to plan for? And we're going to be held responsible for that, whether it's me, you, or anybody else. Let's say it happens 100 years from now, but it's going to happen. We need to make sure that that's in our plan. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilwoman Kesty.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you, Matt, for doing this, and to you guys as well. You had said earlier that there are ways that they want you to look at it and go at it first. And there's the Olympia way and there's the Woolley way. And I think that in Woolley, we have, like Joe said, beat the dead horse. And rather than seeing more density and things that we could do to make this plan go, do it the Woolley way, and what we're saying, what we want to see. And if there's a way to skirt around it and make it happen, bring that to us, because that's how we're going to, it might not be the way that we look at it first. Maybe we already looked at it the way they wanted us to, and now we're hitting it a different way. I think we would all move a lot faster if we just cut straight to the chase, know what Woolley wants. Let's make it happen.
I think one of the things that I've heard from some constituents as well is we've had quite a bit of R15s go up recently in the last couple of years and be available to community members and going past the places, there's still vacancies. So although that they are available, they are not affordable by any means. So changing this, our zoning or anything isn't necessarily making things affordable. And I think there's a huge misconception that's put out there to the community in doing it. And so you've got developers and property owners that, at that level that may be making a profit, charging $2,400 a month for a 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartment. But the reality is, with no stake of ownership in there and no equity being built by that individual, they end up in a life cycle of apartments when they may want to move forward at some point. And then you've also got the reality that you've got single family homes available when they come available that are less than that. And if you wait and look, you can actually get a mortgage that is less than that. It's getting harder and harder now with inflation and all the things, but the apartments aren't necessarily affordable anymore. And I think that's the hard part, that in explaining and talking to various constituents about rezoning and this whole comp plan process and that sorts of things that I've been doing is hearing that feedback and knowing individuals that have recently even gone and looked at some of these apartments and, trying to cut things out of their budgets just to be able to afford to move into something and just finding it not even realistic, let alone the fact that outside of the infrastructure in our roads and stuff in getting in and out, which is a huge concern. to a lot of people that, whether they're living in Woolley and driving, up to Hamilton for jobs, or whether they're here and they're driving to Bellingham, or even just maybe you've got somebody driving their kids to school and have to fight that traffic. We've got, all of those concerns in our road systems. But we're also really struggling with the economic development that comes behind it as well, because you put 851 units in that specific AMI threshold. And then what kind of economic development and sales revenue are we actually generating to support that, and then support our first responders and all of the things necessary to support our city as a whole, and provide them with the resources that they come to expect and that we need to do to provide for them. And so it really becomes a huge catch-22 in all of it. But, R15s and rezoning to that doesn't solve the problem. It's just, from a state level in certain areas, maybe, but for Skagit County and for where we're at here in Sedro-Woolley, I really have a hard time thinking that's going to be a solution.
Thank you. Yeah, Councilman LaBaca.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that, with the zoning of the map, obviously we looked at, I fully agree. I mean, we beat that down. I think there were some ideas like a gravel pit. There's a gravel pit that's already there. Maybe you can rezone that and turn that into a development because it's already set, things like that. But there's not a lot of room for growth. But let's look at the other options that were on the table too. The one that we heard today, the MFTE, right? So we take that 80 to 120%, and we basically push that property tax onto everybody below that who already owns a home around here. And we basically make them exempt, subsidize that for more growth, and we increase that tax. Another option was to put forth a levy, a property tax. And now we even increase more tax on the people that are paying tax, not the people that are exempt. And they're the ones that are paying for the increased roads and all of that stuff. Or specifically for what you were talking about, Matt, that levy would go to be acquiring houses or homes and putting them out at a more affordable rate. So at that affordable rate for the builder, it would have to be subsidized somehow, which will come from state or federal government programs, which are being looked at heavily right now because we're already $8 billion in the hole. But the only recourse, of course, is to raise more taxes on those that are paying taxes. And so what that does to those taxpayers that are now receiving 3, 4, 5 times more tax plus tax on utilities to have the infrastructure built, they're putting them in that 30, 50%, 80% AMI range. So now we're pushing everybody down. So even with the solutions that have been brought to the table in this case, it just doesn't make a lot of sense for Sedro-Woolley. I would definitely agree with Councilwoman Kesty that it would be, in my opinion, a favor to us as the council if you kind of approached it in a different way and said, what loopholes do we have? How can we work around what they're asking and see what we can do? Because it's just not feasible in this community, and put your energy and mind into that, not accommodating Olympia's desire for us to densify. We could do that if we absolutely were a crappy, or not a crappy council, you know what I mean? And we just sign everything away and say, yeah, let's densify, let's do this. But it's what Olympia is telling us to do. And we're not paying attention to any of which other communities have done, and it doesn't turn out well. So I would just, if you don't mind, look at that and see what we can do. Our original comp plan that we're updating right now was accommodating for 26,000, I believe, right? Now we're tracking back to 17,000, but we need more homes, right? We were on plan. My whole thing was that every time I talk to John, it's like, we got everything, we're on plan, we're going to make it. And we retracted that plan from 2036 to 2045. We moved that up. We reduced the amount, but we have to do all this densification still. And I just don't get it. It baffles my mind. And I would say, let's figure out a way to find these loopholes, and where we stand.
And to your point, it's because we were working from the bottom up. We were telling them exactly what we need. We knew what we needed, but now we're being told from the top down, this is what you need.
Yeah.
Councilman Cox.
The planning environment has changed. You're not wrong to notice that.
I, for work, had to periodically go to Seattle, and I did that for many years. And I noticed usually when you headed north, when you got past Everett years ago, it was clean sailing. You're on your way home. And then it got, more recently really bad around Marysville. And I asked a friend of mine who's very knowledgeable about this stuff. And he said, Marysville's one of the fastest growing cities in the state. And I said, I'm glad I live in Sedro-Woolley. And I think all of this discussion is about livability. That, if we allow unfettered density and unfettered growth, then the very thing that we value about Sedro-Woolley is gone. And, I think that's something we should prize and protect.
Right.
If there is nothing else, we will close this up.
Just a suggestion in the last item. That we do the presentation, but not necessarily have the conversation later.
We can do that. So Matt, we want to thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. It's been very, 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 very informative. Appreciate everybody's input. We've got a lot of good direction from everybody tonight. So thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the insight that you gave us as well. That was helpful.
Yep. Have a wonderful evening.
Tom, I don't know if you want to conclude this or.
I just want to say thank you, Matt, and thank you all for listening to this part of our meeting. There's a lot of information to take in there, and I think I'm eager to sit with our consultants in the coming days and go through some of the feedback that we had and see how we can take that and move forward. So thank you.
All right, so moving on to the next item, which is the 2025 Comprehensive Plan Vision Statement Recommendations. So because it is 8:30, it has been recommended by staff that we just go through the agenda, and then we can do discussion at a later date. Is the council okay with that? Is the Planning Commission okay with that?
I just had a question about the vision, right? So would that coincide with essentially the discussion that we just had? I mean, I think all 7 of us spoke up and we were all kind of the same consensus of the direction that we'd like to see this move forward. If I'm speaking out of turn for anybody, please speak up. But if we get this, we can go through this information, sure, but if we don't establish a vision statement for how we want to move forward, my fear is that we're going to go back to the same spot and we're going to be talking to Matt again, and it's going to be June, and he's going to be, hey, it's almost December. You guys got to get this done. So here's our recommendation. You rezone this, you rezone that, you rezone that, and do all these other things. And we're like, hey, wait a minute. We're going to have a discussion about our vision for what the comp plan is. And now everything, and I'm not trying to say anything about anybody, but things do move very slowly through the Planning Commission because they have to look at everything, right? And if we don't, get the horse in front of the cart here with what we want our vision to be for this comp plan, and then it comes time to vote on bringing it forward, and we've already spent all this money on this, and there might be some disappointed people when the council at the very end just says, hey, this isn't what we asked for, this isn't what we wanted, this isn't what we want to adopt. Then what do we do, right? Because the time's already out, and you can't just ask for action on something that, and we're sitting here speaking for the people that we represent, and a lot of the consensus from the people that we represent is, hey, we don't want what we see the state pushing on us in the horizon. So, Mayor, I think it's fine if we go through and finish the agenda. But what I would like to see is an established vision very, very soon, because it's already February and December is 10 short months away.
We also know that, as you well know, that we have funding up into the end of June, into fiscal year. After that, we're not really sure if we're going to have the funding to work through this. So I think that the Planning Commission, the Community Development Department has been working extremely hard. There's a lot of discussion, a lot of conversation. I hear what you're saying. Why should we have a discussion about something that we just said we're not interested in doing? Is that what I'm hearing you saying?
What I'm saying is, what I'd like is for us to have an established vision
Right.
put forward. So everything moving forward. So at the end of the road, there's not going to be any surprises, right? Like, well, we couldn't quite figure everything out to, meet this plan. So now we want you guys to entertain what we'd like to call, an R57, right? And then we're like, wait a minute.
So I guess the question would be, what would be the vision that you have as opposed to what this might be? Tom, do you want to?
If I could just jump in, please. I think there's a presentation that's going to go as a part of this. It's separate from the conversation we just had. So we have two different things going on here. One is the land capacity analysis, and now the other one is recommendation of a vision based on the public input that we had to the surveys. We need to talk about what that is and what that was. Has nothing to do with the land capacity analysis. It's a separate thing here. So what I'd ask you to do, please, is to listen to our presentation here. Marina French is ready to present that and go over all of what we had just been studying on this, and then open it up to questions.
So Commissioner Batisi, is that all right? Do the presentation first, that's a request, and then answer, and then have any questions.
I would just like to add one thing to it. This is not our first comp plan update. And a lot of the elements that are existing in the comprehensive plan, you got land use, capital facilities, transportation, a whole bunch of different things. There's certain things that are not going to change. They're going to be consistent with what we did in the past. But I can assure you, first of all, this is not something that we have not done before. We have very experienced commissioners on this board that, we hear you loud and clear, and we all live here, but we also know the process. And I can assure you, no, we're pretty dialed in on everything that we need to do. And a vision statement, we kicked that around the last time, and it's great. We just had this thing, well, what would you like it to be, whatever. But there's, I want to say 90% of it is like exactly where we want it to be. But we walk a really fine line sometimes of how we make that a policy goal within our comp plan update and how we make that actually happen, right? So you can set a policy or a goal of something and, okay, well, your land use zoning is going to be like this. However, your capital facilities, you can handle waste treatment and transportation and all these other things that need to go into it as well. It's not as complicated as a lot of people think. It's just common sense in a lot of respects. We have to listen to our engineering departments and our planning departments and what we already have in place right now. I mean, we have a lot of development right now going on in the city. So when we do this next comp plan update, are we already there? How close are we to there? And what are other things that we need to do?
Okay,
but I
thank
don't
you.
see any
Commissioner
major changes.
Batisi, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you know me, I'll go on forever on this. I'm
Yeah.
passionate.
Yeah, we have a presentation that we want to show,
I
and we'll take
apologize.
questions after that.
And my thought is that you've got three recommended options here for a vision statement. If you are prepared tonight to perhaps select one, modify one, and adopt one, certainly can do that too. I was just thinking in the interest of time, I don't want to waste your time or, ask you to be here till 11. But my thought is if we could hear the presentation first and get this background into what goes into the vision statement exercise, that'd be really great. So Marina, I'd like to introduce you. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Marina French. I met some of you in December. I'm a landscape architect with Facet, and I'm working with the planning team, Matt and Donna. So I'm going to share my screen here. One moment. Okay. All right, I'm all set up now. Okay, so here's a quick overview of the presentation tonight. We'll be looking at what's the purpose of a vision statement, some of the characteristics that make for a successful vision statement, and then as Tom described, I'm going to give you some overview of the community feedback we've gotten so far, as well as the Planning Commission feedback, and then our recommendations for some revisions. So first, the purpose. So let's revisit the why. This vision statement should illustrate what the city values and what it wants in the future. And to a previous comment, yeah, definitely I was taking notes, and you know, like a word that popped up was livability, you know, things like that. This is this high level vision, like what are your values? What do you want? Specifically, it targets 20 years in the future. And it also should address all the elements of a comp plan. And finally, it's meant to be a tool for leadership to reflect upon and revisit when you're making decisions. It's to make sure that decisions you make are keeping within the spirit of whatever this vision is. So I think a part of the value of creating the vision statement is that it kind of compels you to have these conversations and get on the same page. So as you move forward and make decisions, you're thinking of this in the same way. So some characteristics of what's considered a really effective community statement are listed here. So they should be succinct, like a few sentences. They should be really clear and provide the simple yet comprehensive goals, concise sentences. Abstract and challenging means, you know, they should be kind of not too specific, like we want to build this specific building. They should be more general, like we want to safe neighborhoods. The purpose, it should provide a general idea of why, you know, the plan exists and what the community intends to achieve over a certain timeline. And then to have very future focused and desirable community goals. So they should have long-term, clearly described in state, like the state, what is it like 20 years from now in Sedro-Woolley, right? So what's the current vision statement? You can also refer to Appendix A in your packet for the complete version of the 2016 vision statement. So it's a few, right now you'll see the current plan has like a beginning overview vision statement, and then each element actually has its own unique vision statement, and then there's an additional kind of at the end summary vision statement. So this is just focusing on the first overall vision statement. So I'm going to assume that you all are familiar with this. So you can see there's a lot of thought and effort and creativity that was put into this statement. It really embraces this idea of a future vision. It includes a lot of abstract descriptions and goals. And as Commissioner Fatizi mentioned, it definitely has remained consistent over quite a few updates. So when we reread this, though, through the lens of those goal characteristics we just went over, you can see that there's still opportunities to review this vision with fresh eyes, not only to ensure that it's up to date and it still represents the community values, but also with these characteristics in mind, like for clarity, maybe there's some duplication in some of the sentences, like many people know each other, residents greet each other by name, business owners know each other. So you could argue that these have a similar enough message that they could be made more succinct. And yeah, so even though they're very positive, we may not need 3 sentences to say that if we're trying to achieve this goal of brevity. Another example might be for the characteristic of abstract and challenging. You'd want to shy away from really specific statements like referencing signs on the highways or walking around specific streets. So you'd want to keep that a little higher level. So going back to the process to this point to gather community feedback on the vision, a survey was distributed back in June, and it was published on the website, and it was sent around by email, social media, and there was 260 responses, which is really great. And this informed the vision statement. So this is summary of what I just said. I guess I skipped the slide. So here's the results. Top 4 qualities that respondents stated they love about Sedro-Woolley. So these are these kind of words we're talking about, right? This livability. So small community feel, walkability, quality of life, sense of community, friendly people, right? Proximity to outdoor recreation areas. Top 4 concerns: increase in traffic, becoming a bedroom community, losing quality of life, and lack of affordable housing. So really not surprising. The 4 hopes for Sedro-Woolley in the next 20 years, that has grown gracefully. It's maintained its identity. The downtown is vibrant and thriving. There's more parks and open space trails, and it has well-maintained infrastructure, adequate services, and schools that meet daily needs. So following the public online survey, then we met with the Planning Commission in December and presented that and talked about the current vision statement and discussed ideas for revising it. And so here's some of the takeaways from that meeting. So tension exists between GMA requirements and what the city can provide. It's a challenge to contend with growth requirements, giving limitations, as you've all discussed earlier tonight. Strong desire to maintain small town feel and quality of life. And overall, the vision does not seem to have varied in the past 20 years. So some of the factors that are still relevant from the existing vision, according to the survey, right? What have people mentioned? Diversity, acknowledging history, feeling of safety, focusing on downtown, having an identity, thinking about economy, and that small town emphasis. So some factors that came up that maybe aren't present currently in the vision statement are discussions of technology, things being multi-generational, cultural amenities, housing diversity, location, clear identity. That's something that was discussed but may not be present in the current vision. So based on the results of this survey and what we heard during the Planning Commission, we would recommend revising this current statement to be a little bit more concise. And we generated a few different vision statements for consideration. The first 2 are more focused on quality of life and the local resident experience. And then the third one is somewhat for the sake of an alternative, but also due to some of the things we heard about ideas that focus on the quality of the experience visiting the city and thinking about how visitors experience the town. So with that in mind, I can present those here now. So first option for the resident focus. And this is one of those, like, is it more annoying for me to read it out loud, or do you? I know I don't like it when people read me things, but I guess I am presenting, so I'll just read it. Sedro-Woolley is a vibrant, friendly, small town, welcoming community with a rich cultural and historical heritage surrounded by agriculture and natural beauty. It's a place that has grown gracefully, maintaining a high quality of life for its residents. Diverse multi-generational neighborhoods feature a variety of housing choices within walking distance of expansive parks and open spaces, trails, events, amenities, and multimodal transportation options. With a healthy mix of retail, commercial businesses, housing, and gathering spaces, our thriving downtown central business district is the heart of the city. All of these options also have this optional sentence to focus on environment and tourism. So, for example, for this option, the community's strong focus on recreational tourism and environmental stewardship complements a thriving local economy while maintaining the qualities that make Sedro-Woolley a highly desirable place to live and visit. So this is the kind of a longer version of the option. And then option 2 is a little bit more succinct. The community of Sedro-Woolley wants to preserve its historic character, small town feel, and physical and visual access to the surrounding landscape. The residents of the community desire safe and walkable streets and enhancements of amenities, services, and programs that provide convenience and connections. The city supports improvements to promote health, beauty, and quality of life for multiple generations of residents. So the optional environmental focus sentence in this one says, the city also prioritizes improvements that bring multifunctional tree, canopy, and landscape green infrastructure improvements with development changes to maintain a balance between the natural and built environment within the city. So that's again, these can be intermixed. This is definitely for you all to digest, and I'm not sure how many of you read this before tonight, but some of the key, I think, things to think about when we look at these options are these action words and things like the city supports improvements, right? And so when you're making a decision, like someone brings something to you to approve, and you can just say, well, does this promote health? Does this promote beauty, right? This is what I mean about these statements can be somewhat, they can guide the spirit of your decisions. I'll move on to the last one. So this is the one that's slightly more outward focused, as I described, and maybe in some ways this is just sort of a thought exercise of, like, if you imagine this from the perspective of, you know, it's more, if you were more tourism focused as a city, what would it sound like? And does that feel like a fit, or does that feel really not like a fit? So Sedro-Woolley is a welcoming gateway to the beauty of the Puget Sound and Cascades. A busy and diverse downtown area provides top quality amenities and essential services to locals and visitors alike on a small town scale. The city of Sedro-Woolley promotes local events and nearby recreational opportunities to provide a safe, convenient, and accessible experience while enhancing the natural and historic character of the city. And then the optional environmental statement. The city of Sedro-Woolley embodies its spirit of innovation and its value of natural resources through prioritizing green infrastructure throughout the city. As the city changes, these multifunction spaces will provide sustainable solutions that bring the beauty of the surrounding landscape into the day-to-day city experience. So it's a little bit similar to the option 2 with this thinking about green infrastructure as an idea, but slightly different. So those are the 3 options. That is my presentation, and I'll leave it to you for time. How much discussion or just digestion, and we're available for any follow-up questions, or Tom, however you want to. If you have any more to say.
Any questions?
Yeah, Mayor, if you don't mind. So I did like the vision statements. They do kind of encapsulate a lot of what we do, but one thing that was missing was something that's important to everybody here, right? And that's money. We're not going to have a well-living neighborhood. We're not going to enjoy our properties. We're not going to enjoy our houses if we don't have good jobs. And if we don't want to be a bedroom community transporting out and coming in, we should appreciate the businesses that are here. We had the largest log bridge ever built in the world put up back in the late 1800s, early 1900s to pull logs off the hill. That was innovation. That was technology that wasn't around to do the job. We had Skagit Steel with the McIntyres come out. They did things that revolutionized the world in their event. They had that whole Sealand Park. We have a foundry over there. They did amazing things. We had Janicki right now. They're doing really good things. They're growing exponentially with the aerospace field and space travel, high technologies, advanced parts. And then Sedron right here in the middle of this whole Sealand Park, right? That thing's like this massive thing right in the middle of Sedro-Woolley that nobody really talks about. It's huge. It's already purchased. It's going to be a big campus. So I think innovation and technology, business, creating a way that we can incorporate, you know, good paying jobs into that vision statement. How can that be part of the community rather than something that's just kind of off to the side, since it's right in the heart? And it's also going to help provide that livability Yeah, you go to a community that's been decimated with the loss of a mill or something where they counted on it, and it's just decimated. The houses are ran down, the lawns are overgrown, people don't have the clothes that they need. They're not out enjoying vacations because the money isn't there. And I think that we don't want to forget that in that statement. But without money, all of that stuff kind of goes to the wayside.
And we should also extol, in addition to large businesses, small businesses, which is the lifeblood of our community. That's what the downtown is. And, you know, without small businesses, you know, we have a lot less jobs.
Well, small businesses definitely bring a lot to any community. But when we look at retail business, there's got to be balance. There's got to be industry, good trades, careers, you know, whether that's in technology or service or business. Burlington has a lot of retail. How much is a manager at Walmart or at Home Depot or at Best Buy going to be making? And is that a career job? And can everybody that hires on there get to that manager position? Burlington has a lot of retail. Other than that, it's medical and education. Those are the biggest things for Burlington and Mount Vernon. Insurance pays a lot of the medical bill, and we already know we're paying way too much insurance. And then also with the schooling, that's subsidized from a lot of grant programs, usually from the government, so that gets taxed, or loans through the government, so that gets taxed, and that's also not generating income. So our community is unique. It has an ability. I think we can capture that in our vision statement if that's something we're looking at. Not specifics, obviously, but that we want to have good business infrastructure in our community in 20 years. We want to be able to set up for that. One of the biggest complaints I get from small business to big business is we're not, as a community, embracing, right? The locals opened up downtown, but when they first opened up, they had to get a permit to put a sticker on the window and then get that checked before they can open. So they just, a lot of businesses may not feel as welcome, and we can incorporate that.
And also somebody who raised 5 kids, I think we should extol our local K through 12 schools. They are across the board very good, in my opinion.
So just to follow up about that, so maybe the vision includes something that talks about attracting businesses, that Sedro-Woolley is a town that businesses want to be based in, like sort of along those lines. Is that how you mean, or is it more like
well, 20 years from now, there may be a whole new business. Like I said, there's been a number of people that have developed great technology. They grew, they shrunk, new business came, they shrunk, new business came, they'll shrink, and new ones will come. What's fortunate about us is it's local. And that's really amazing. It's the thing that's kind of impressed me. When I do school presentations and I'm looking at these middle schoolers or high schoolers, I'm telling them, you guys are the future of Sedro-Woolley. And when the Janicki family rises and fades, and all of them do, I mean, it's an ebb and flow. New people from Janicki will rise up, and we just want to be, you know, welcoming to that and have that business atmosphere set up, the innovation, that technology,
That I heard you say a rich history in technology.
Rich history.
A rich history in technology.
Yeah, and so it sounds almost like flexibility to accommodate these changes. That's a part of it. Is you want to be nimble as a city to allow for maybe different types of technology we don't even know yet. Would the code allow that kind of thing, right? So you're talking about, is that a part of the vision?
On the edge of technologies and innovation.
Yeah, the word innovation was mentioned.
Yeah, we have mentioned just slightly
center, right?
Yeah, in option 3.
Yeah.
Yes. Entrepreneurship.
Oh, do you hear that? Entrepreneurship. Good one.
And so thinking about entrepreneurship in a physical space way, like maybe that sounds funny. Do you kind of know what I mean? Sort of if you're thinking about this in like an abstract way, does that mean, again, I guess it goes back to that, what you have control over as a vision of encouraging. So you have, again, I kind of keep going back to that. Is it wrong to say flexibility? Like you want that, you want to have that ability to allow for that entrepreneurship, that those new types of businesses to come whatever they are, into your town, and you want to be kind of accommodating. Would that be like a good word for it?
Well, it's almost like accommodating rich history of our technology and entrepreneurship, maybe.
Councilwoman Kesty?
I think we're missing the mark. At least that's how I feel. Same with that video that was shown to us a while back. We're missing the heart, and this feels very sterile and chat GPT, generated.
I wrote it, I promise. But yeah, no, I hear you. Tell me more. Yeah.
If 25 years from now or 30 years from now, this is what we're looking at, it makes me sad. I don't feel like this is representing our community, and I don't feel like that's where our community is striving for. It's missing its heart, and that.
Oops, sorry.
Would you be able to maybe write stuff, because you work at the museum, she understands the whole history of the kind of the Sedro-Woolley. It'd be interesting to hear an excerpt that maybe you write up based upon that and see what that looks like.
Yeah, I could
Based upon
definitely
it.
put something
Yeah.
forward with everything that we're trying to piece together, just as a suggestion.
So when you say it's missing the heart, what's the heart?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm trying to think of how to encompass it off the fly like this, but I know that with what you presented, that's how I felt reading it. It felt fake and forced.
Like generic, not
Yes,
Sedro-Woolley.
yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
And Nick's given great examples as to how to change that. I loved yours as well. So it would take me a hot minute to put something together, but with what has been presented, I feel like we could very much hit the mark.
Yeah, that'd be great.
I loved your suggestion about the schools and how you were trying to bring in the small bit. I feel like that is what we're talking about, not that.
I have a good friend who's a long-term business person in Anacortes. And he said, I was over there a few weeks ago, and he said something to me. He said, Anacortes has kind of lost its sense of community. It doesn't feel like a small town like it used to be. And I don't know how you get to it, but what Sedro-Woolley is and why it's a special place, it's some of the elements were in there. Friendly, small town, people respect each other. It's a place people want to live. I mean, I could walk down, I lived in Washington, D.C. I would never walk down the street without looking over my shoulder. And I'm 6'2". It's a dangerous place. Whereas here, I can walk down the street. Our kids can play in the neighborhood. So there's something, I don't know how you get to that, but that's what makes it special. And my friend said, I'd rather live in Sedro-Woolley. And I was like, oh.
Well, I think something for me, Sedro-Woolley, and I've used this before, but Sedro-Woolley to me, especially when you're downtown, it holds our history and it tells our story. And I think that that's really true of our central business district, because it is a very Americana feel, and yet we're 21st century.
So keeping that history alive, and that this is sort of saying preserve its historic character, and I guess it's sort of that trying to make it abstract, and I don't want, so that's gone kind of too far. It'd be great to get some feedback on that, but I definitely appreciate how you're describing this. This is helpful.
And I like Councilman Lavaca's talk about innovation and technology, because when I moved here, those 2 mills had shut down. I remember the city attorney, I forget his name, talking about how, everybody was out of work. It was, and it's that innovation that without the money, people leave. Or I will say one other point that is, I don't know how we address the affordability, what you were talking about. We have one of our kids is interested in moving up here. He lives in San Francisco. He checked the rents here. He said, they're not a lot better in Sedro-Woolley than San Francisco. I was shocked. So, it's a great place to live, but a lot of people can't afford it.
Can I ask one more follow-up question? What do you think it is about Sedro-Woolley that allowed for that innovation to happen? I know maybe it's a kind of a broad question, but is there anything specific you can think about?
Madam Mayor, we should probably ask some of our business people here. We got like in a small town of 13,000, there's $1 billion company right in the heart, on the leading edge of technology, building the most advanced things in the world, taking people to Mars, putting things on the moon, putting things around Jupiter. And, you know, it's just like right there. And when you look around, it's this historic feel. It's nice. You don't even think about it. You don't notice it. It's not this huge conglomerate like you would have like Amazon or Microsoft or something like that right down in an area, or a big giant brick building that's all blocky like you would have in California or New Mexico, Arizona, that kind of stuff. So I mean, it's just something to consider. I would ask, see like what brought that? What brought that idea of innovation? And it'll give an inclination on what the next generation, that future generation is going to be kind of looking at.
Well, I would say we're visionaries in our own way. That's where the technology has come from. We're visionaries. And that makes us a little different, I think, from the other towns in this county. Anyone else? Yes.
On the on the public survey portion that was presented, one of the things that stuck out to me was the people here really, they do not want us to be a bedroom community for the larger cities and stuff like that around us. Now, part of what I'm worried about with like the comp plan as a whole is, again, what we're being asked to do, or, you know, we've been shown some options of you know, well, we need to get this to here in order to be able to provide X amount of houses for people at, you know, a certain AMI and all that other stuff. And so I feel like a lot of the hang up, I mean, this is great. I like hearing some of these vision plans. I'd love for you to come up with something too that we could, you know, kind of focus on. But like one of the larger things that I'm looking at is how are we going to get from right now till 10 months from now passing this comp plan with it being something that we can all, you know, sleep at night with, right? So and you know, Nick, to your point of, you know, all the different technology and all the different industries we have here, I think that, you know, we need more jobs, so we're not a bedroom community for somebody else. But we need diversified jobs too. Not all of us are going to work at an aerospace manufacturing company. A lot of us already have. You know, a lot of us have moved on to other things, and we need some of those other industries to come in here. We need to be, you know, super business friendly. You know, and it's not just going to be retail. It's going to be all kinds of other things that people are going to want. If we are a mecca for people who want to turn a profit and then employ people to come to.
So business friendly for a variety of.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I think the kayak shop that was going to go in by Sims, right?
Right.
That was awesome. The concept was awesome. We just drove them out because we wanted too much from the city.
No, that isn't how it happened.
Oh, okay. Well,
Yeah, no.
it seemed like we wanted them to put in
No,
roads.
we even got them a grant and everything to make it possible. They walked away.
Yeah.
They walked away. It was business partners. There's a whole lot more to it, but no, we did not drive them away. We did not. We were very disappointed.
So they're in like Illinois or something
Yeah,
like that. now, actually.
yeah,
They moved away,
or Utah,
something like that.
something like that, yeah.
Cheap labor.
well,
I would agree though with Councilmember Henderson in that we need to allow for diversity and not pigeonhole ourselves into one or two very specific industries, because we never know what would happen, right? If we do that, we put all our eggs in one basket and there's an economic downturn in that specific industry, it will collapse our complete community. I mean, if you have 1,000, 2,000 people, families, that are relying on this specific income, it takes loss of one contract to put people out of work for 3-4 months while that they work on new contracts. Or, you know, if you're looking at contracts, government contracts or private sector contracts, and those are, you know, you bid them, we all know the bid processes, you have to go through all that, and that's all time that these individuals are unemployed. And so just being able to have some diversity in what is available to our community for jobs is important. And, you know, there's a lot of people here with a lot of different skill sets and a lot of really great skill sets that we could utilize in different areas. And just not pigeonholing ourselves, I think, into one thing specific is ideal. Because I mean, just like sitting in this room, we all have different backgrounds, we all have different strengths, right? And we probably all do very well in what we do every day, and are different. And that's why it's great to come together as a group, because we have different thought processes from different backgrounds and can throw that out on the table. And the community as a whole is much larger than us. And so being able to provide an opportunity for people to have economic growth for themselves and success, their individual successes that allow them to grow and them to be successful and them to provide for their families and their household. And if we can provide that to our community, then I think we're successful in providing them the opportunities to create their own destiny and their own opportunity for growth in bringing these businesses and allowing them to come here.
It's more than retail. It's plumbers, electricians, HVAC, people who own little garages or bigger garages.
Right.
And, you know, those are the small businesses that actually employ a lot of people. I get the thing about the large employers, and they're
Absolutely.
critically important. But I think you need both.
Yeah, I think there's other industrial zones in Sedro-Woolley. We could never hire a company to come in or make our own company. We're a city. We don't do that. So whoever rises, whoever comes up, that's on their own efforts, their money, their success to draw them in. The idea is to show that we are business friendly, trades friendly, retail friendly, entrepreneur friendly, that we love to see that kind of growth, because that's what we've been experiencing over the last 100 years.
Right. And a
That's
lot of
good, yeah.
a lot of that too, in talking with various entities and businesses that were looking at coming into the city of Sedro-Woolley, is that some of them, in order to come into town, would have to have, you know, there's certain restrictions on highways and freeways and that sorts of stuff. And unfortunately, we're kind of stuck. You know, we have Quick Road and Highway 20, and it makes it very difficult to move certain things, or they're stuck in their hours of the day. And then the state comes down and provides additional restrictions on hours and wages and all the things that then trickle itself down, right? So there's a lot of different aspects, but we go right back into our infrastructure and how that applies itself. But at the end of the day, I think Councilmember Lavaca made a very good point about somehow incorporating something to do with unlimited economic growth opportunities or something with businesses, and being able, just the city being able to provide those opportunities.
So, Marina, I see you nodding, and it looks like you're taking some notes.
I'm
too.
taking tons of notes, yeah.
Excellent, great, thanks. What, how do you suggest we proceed from here? Because it would be nice to take in these comments here and apply them somehow to one of the options. And I think Councilmember Kesty was going to add some stuff too. We may not be ready tonight to necessarily adopt something, but how can we do this? We could take what you can come up with as summary of what we heard tonight, take that to the Planning Commission, say on the meeting's February 18th, and then bring that back to council at the meeting following that, the 26th.
Yes.
Good
Said hopefully we can get this done in February, right?
Yes.
And also just to email, if you want to compile, if you get any sort of email like feedback in the next few days, and especially,
So
I'm sorry, I can't
wonder-
always see who's talking, but some of the suggestions would be great if anyone wants to write a sentence or two that you feel so compelled.
Bring it back to the planning commission, have her write things up or bring it back to the planning commission.
That's what I'm thinking as
Yeah.
the next step, and kind of like a screen or whatever, or maybe have them do a recommendation to bring to council then.
Yeah, so Marina, would that be possible to write up a couple more options that incorporate? I mean, you can even use some of the options that you have now worded and whatnot, but incorporate it and bring that back to the planning commission, and then they can make any
May I
changes or
bring my
recommendations.
Yeah. Email it.
Okay, can I bring Mike?
Yes.
To
Yeah,
the
yeah.
commission?
Yeah, I was gonna say if I could have that feedback from the historian. I'm sorry, I missed names. It's hard that I'm not there.
Councilwoman Kesty, she can, yeah.
Yes,
she can-
please.
My own, and I'll give it to you, and if you like it, great. You can do what you.
Well, yeah, it doesn't matter if I like it, just I'll just pass it on to the planning commission. Bet.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I know, because we didn't really, I know I'm like, we're late, it's late, but if something kind of spins around, want to give it a couple days to compile a couple more comments, that would be great. That's fine with me, and then I can definitely just take another shot at 2 more drafts.
And I really like hearing some of the stuff tonight, innovation and entrepreneurship, business, the good business infrastructure, missing the heart, sense of community, schools, small businesses, large, what I say, large businesses or industry.
Industrial.
Yeah, that's all really cool stuff.
That's also exciting.
And what?
Manufacturing.
Yeah, I put tech in there. Tech's a big part of it.
Oh, technology
Yeah.
too, yeah.
Yeah.
I can't. So, yeah, and then let's see, so our cutoff for planning commission packet is, which day, I don't know, like, it's the Friday before.
Friday, yeah.
So if I could
Will
get,
that give you time?
yeah.
Okay,
If
perfect.
I can get
Valentine's Day?
Okay.
input and ideas and thoughts, just send them to me by email or in person, whatever, and I'm happy to forward that up.
And Marina, I want to thank you for these 3 options. I think that they're great options. They give us a good base to work from. So thank you very much for your effort that you put forth. It is appreciated.
For sure. Yeah. No, and it's definitely meant to be the starting point. We tried to make them different enough to trigger and it's good. Even if it triggers a bad reaction, that's good, right? Because we know, like, oh, that was not the direction, right? So it's kind of nice to know the bounds, and this was really helpful tonight. Thanks for everybody's comments.
Well, thank you. Or should we close this
No,
out?
I appreciate you guys' patience and getting through this tonight, yeah, thank you.
Yes, go ahead.
Marina, I think these were a great start. And if you're looking for kind of a jumping off point with all the things that were brought up tonight, I thought option 1 could be a good starting point because it has some of the key kind of beginning thoughts in that regard. And then, I'm sure you'll end up with something completely different than once Councilwoman Kesty submits her stuff. Maybe something completely different. Also, I was reading through all of the survey comments at the end, and it's just interesting. I mean, people have all sorts of things they value, but it's interesting. I was thinking, oh, I agree with that. And there's so many things. It's really hard to compact that down and without making it sound like it is every other generic.
Yeah.
That's the one thing that Sedro-Woolley has in our current iteration of the vision statement, which is long, but it is very different than and that's something that, most people have mentioned. So I don't know how we keep that heart and that character, but
But you know what?
Take a stab at it, so.
I like somebody said, well, maybe the Woolley way is a little longer, and that's fine. It's a challenge it's based on recommendations, but if it sounds too generic, like that doesn't work. And this is about having something that you all feel good about and move forward with. So I wouldn't be, I guess, held back by the length, right? Let's not let us hold that back. if it doesn't seem right, you know.
Okay,
All right, well, with that, I think we'll finish up here with 2025 comprehensive vision. And thank you, Marina. You have a good night.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Can I say one last thing?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay,
Yes.
so it's already February. And if we're gonna get this comp plan done by the end of the year, that needs to be to you guys before year end. A prior comp plan is 7 elements. It's been included now to 8 with a climate change element. So we have a lot of things to discuss here that are visionary. So my own experiences, let's start with the easier stuff that I can start getting certain elements done, like my capital facilities, my public utilities, my transportation element, that is coming from other people outside of any collective wisdom. It is what it is, kind of technical aspect. So for our next vision, this is the kind of stuff we love to talk about forever. But at the end of the day, we have certain elements of the comp plan that all need to get done. So all I'm saying is this was great discussion. By the way, a lot of you council members said the exact same thing that I said when we met back in December. This has been an evolving economy in the city of Sedro-Woolley, right? We were a resource economy that now has evolved to the most amazing things. But our past and our resource economy is still a big part of this overall Skagit County experience, Whatcom County, all of us. So if we're going to get this 2025 plan by the end of the year, let's be a little bit more focused on what we can get done easier, that is more technical from staff kind of things. And let's take the heavier lifting maybe to the back end. That's just my feeling on this.
All right, thank you. Okay, if there are no other comments, want to thank you again, Marina. You have a good night, and we'll be getting back with you. And we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Kind of nice to get out a little early, right?